Thank you, Ward. I'd like to call Planning Advisory Committee to order. I have regrets from Pam Harvey. She can't make it, and I want to welcome Sam Balcom, member of Planning Advisory here, and those watching online. Welcome. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes of January 21, 2025. Move the approval. Moved in second. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. There is a change in the order of the agenda, so we'll be doing item 26, item 27, and item 28, because one of the counselor has to leave early, and their interest is in those three areas. Item 26, UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy, groundwater. Debbie, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As part of the UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy, Council authorized staff to engage a consultant to complete a groundwater study for the UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy area. Earth Water Consultants, Inc. were selected to undertake the study, and the study is now complete. And that study has been included with the staff report. Planning staff have used the results of the groundwater studies to suggest amendments to the existing community plan. The groundwater study for the UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy is very technical and quite detailed. The consultant has provided a study summary at the beginning of the report, which is less technical and easier for the general public to read. And so I'm just going to go through some of the key points from the study. So here we have is a map of the study area and showing the rock formations. The study area is outlined here in red. And just for context, this is the there's a gray line here, and this is Highway 1, and then there's another line here that is the 101 along here. So the Kennard Formation, which is the light green, the Beaver Bank Formation, which is the gray right here, and the Taylor's Head Formation, which takes up most of the area, which is this peachy orange color. Just show peachy orange up there. Anyways, those are the most appropriate rock formations for well water. The majority of the study area is comprised of the Taylor's Head Formation. And again, that's that peachy orange color. Well depths reported in the UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy area range from about 13.7 meters to 191.5 meters with an average of 78.2 meters. Over 40% of the study area can use dug wells where the overburden conditions are adequate. That just means there's enough soil on top of the bedrock in order to allow for the dug well to occur. The consultant wasn't able to find available data on dug well water quality for the UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy area. However, dug wells should be expected to produce generally good quality water, although that water may be more corrosive to plumbing systems than water produced from drilled wells, and dug wells are more prone to experiencing surface water contamination or to having groundwater levels in them drop below pump intakes or below the bottom of the wells than drilled wells are. Calculations suggest there is sufficient groundwater recharge within the UNIAC study area to meet the needs of over 22,800 homes, or approximately 54,000 people, and sufficient aquifer water storage in the bedrock and the types of bedrock to meet the drought conditions for that number of homes for between 9 and 37 years. As the community becomes denser, well interference could become an issue. As new wells are constructed, they may interfere with existing wells, especially on some of those areas where there's already existing undersized lots. Additional blasting for new developments and other human interference could also impact groundwater resources. So we know that a lot of Mount Uniacke there's a lot of bedrock there, and as you blast for new development, there could be well interference occur from that blasting. Calculations done from developments with similar bedrock geology suggest that new lots within the UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy study area may need to be as large as 1.3 to 1.7 hectares to help avoid well interference in denser developments. All three bedrock types identified were found to produce generally good quality alkaline, moderately hard to hard, calcium bicarbonate type waters with near to slightly above neutral pH. Some wells may have elevated levels of iron, manganese, and arsenic, which can be treated. And the consultant has actually provided a table of water treatment options in the groundwater study itself. So those are actually very helpful for anybody who's interested in how to treat their water, depending on what their how their testing comes on their well. So that's a good resource. Also, he indicated that arsenic, iron, manganese, and perhaps even mercury may arise as human-caused well water quality issues of concern at or near the former South Uniacke and Mount Uniacke gold mine districts, and that's because of the former gold mining in these areas. Care must be exercised to mitigate against possible growing urban-type sources of groundwater contamination, and these may include road salt, petroleum product spills, fertilizers and pesticides, and leaking septic treatment systems. Before permitting large or denser developments, an additional understanding of well interference should be studied by the developers. So based on the results of the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Groundwater Study, staff have one recommendation to be included in the draft Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy, and that's to require that a Level 2 groundwater assessment be completed for proposed rezonings and development agreements where the total number of proposed dwelling units exceeds 25 dwelling units. Requirements in the Provincial Guide to Groundwater Assessments for Subdivisions Serviced by Private Wells indicates that a Level 2 groundwater assessment shall be completed for proposed subdivisions with greater than 25 lots. So that's being consistent with our provincial guidelines. And in addition to that, although a Level 2 assessment does require that test wells be drilled, those test wells, if they're drilled in the appropriate places, can be then sold with the lot, and people can change them over to a homeowner well, so that price of the drilling of the well can be included in the lot sale. So they can be combined. And so the recommendation is to include the recommendation outlined in the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Groundwater Report in the draft Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. Wishing to speak, Councilor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great report, Debbie. I have just one question about lot sizes. So, 1.3 to 1.7 hectares. Is that going to be included in the recommendation for the planning strategy, or just his opinion, like the opinion of the? About the 1.3 to 1.7 hectares per lot, is that going to be included in the recommendation for the study, or just like the opinion of the company that made the survey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's the information that was presented by the consultant, and that was for denser developments or adjacent to denser developments. And what staff isn't recommending that we increase the lot sizes. What we are in the next report, if they're looking to do townhouses or something like that, then we would recommend that if you're having 6 townhouses on a lot, maybe you have that 1.3 to 1.7 hectares of area in order to accommodate that townhouse, because then you're having 6 different homes on one lot.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that, but as long as not for a single unit. Or
No, we're not proposing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. Great synopsis of a very technical report, Debbie. I read through the initial report, and then this is bang on. So great job. One of the things it mentions here is blasting, right? And you know, I'm not going to belay everybody with this again, but you know, we do have a quarry issue in Mount Uniacke that affects everything right in the middle of that water source. So it affects everybody. Glad to see that that was taken into consideration. There are a lot of old wells in Mount Uniacke that people have already experienced. A new development comes in, somebody's had a well for 50 years, and next, you know, the well next to them is drilled a little bit deeper, and then they had to kind of go through some of that. Now, I've talked to a couple people, and some of the developers that came in, once they were approached by the neighbor that happened, they went and mitigated it for them right away as a good neighbor deed. So hopefully that will continue anywhere that happens. But definitely it is a good eye opener to show the potential of 54,000 people or 22,000 homes in the Mount Uniacke area. So for that, I'm going to move the recommended motion.
have a seconder? Second. Eli? Thank you, Counselor. Nobody left to speak. We'll go to the vote. How do I check Counselor Tingley? And the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Debbie. Next item on the agenda is the UNIX Secondary Planning Strategy Motion C-24-443. Debbie, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, at the December meeting, council passed the following motion here in regards to the UDS secondary planning strategy. And during the December meeting, PAC members indicated that they would like staff to investigate a new zone for lands around Eddie's Variety that would enable a mix of commercial and residential development. Staff have developed are proposing the Mount Uniacke Mixed Use Center Overlay MU-MC's designation and zone. And this is shown out here in the pink with the pink dots. And again, it would act as an overlay designation and zone. And just to identify some of the underlying zoning, it has R2, R1, there's some industrial commercial, highway commercial, and general commercial uses. In addition, there's also the Pockwalk water supply area. So due to the variety of land uses currently taking place along Highway 1, staff have suggested that rather than replacing the existing zones, that an overlay zone is implemented in the prescribed area. That way, we don't make somebody an unlawful existing use. An overlay zone will continue to allow the single-unit dwellings, two-unit dwellings, and it maintains the industrial commercial uses and allows for other varied commercial uses to continue. Planning staff have drafted new land use policies for the implementation of the new Mount Uniacke Mixed-Use Center Overlay Zone and designation that have been included in the staff report. So the land uses in the proposed zone would be permitted by site plan approval. The type of commercial land use permitted in the MUMC zone would be similar to the commercial land uses permitted in the mixed-use center zone in Enfield, so the similar uses to that. A full list of those permitted uses have been included in the staff report. Small multiplexes and cluster townhouses are also proposed to be permitted in the new zone. The lot will have to be large enough to accommodate a septic system and a well. And the general provisions for the mixed-use zones would also be applicable to the new proposed zone. So that's your buffering and landscaping provisions. So if you need some uses require a fence to be put around it, so that would be required in this area as well. Excuse me. So in addition to that new zone, staff proposed a method of increasing residential density in the Mount Uniacke Growth Management Area. As a method of increasing density in the Mount Uniacke Growth Management Area, staff suggests developing new comprehensive development district policies that are specific to Mount Uniacke. It would allow a holistic community growth. So just like what we do here in the quarter when we look at CDDs, is that we take into consideration road networks, we take into consideration the types of homes being proposed, we take into consideration the existing community, stormwater management, open space. For example, in Mount Uniacke, what would be important to take into consideration is access to maybe dry hydrants or something like that, because there are no fire hydrants. So all those things would be taken into consideration under the CDD process. And the Mount Uniacke CDD would allow for a variety of low to medium density residential options while ensuring that multiple unit lots are an appropriate size for on-site services and to minimize well interference. And that's where, as I mentioned, the 1.3, 1.7 size. So if you have a set of townhouses with 6 units in it, you have that larger lot size. Housing options for the new land use designation zone would include single-unit dwellings, two-unit dwellings, townhouses, small multiplexes, and local commercial uses. Those local and commercial uses would be, for example, your daycare, your cafe, your small takeout restaurant, those types of uses. At this time, staff do not recommend pre-zoning land in Mount Uniacke, the Comprehensive Development District. Instead, council should consider mapping amendments if they felt the application was in the best interest of the municipality. And that's similar to what many of the spots we've done here in the corridor, for example, Armco and FH Development. They did mapping amendments in addition to the development agreement. And the reason we're looking at that, one of the reasons, is that there are a lot of unknowns in Mount Uniacke with the on-site services. And if we set it up so that they can automatically go into development agreement and there's a lot of public outcry, then that development agreement is appealable to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. But if it's just done, they ask for a mapping amendment at the same time, then it can't be appealed to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. So it gives council a little bit more discretion in the decisions that they make. Staff have developed a draft set of policies that would enable council to consider applications to redesignate rezone land to Mount Uniacke Comprehensive Development District. Policies have been included in the staff report. Policies that are very similar to the ones for the Walkable Comprehensive Development District, except the policies related to central servicing have been removed and new policies around septic systems and wells have been added. And due to well interference being an issue, the policies are proposed to include a level 2 assessment for denser developments or developments adjacent to existing developments. So we know on Rockwell Drive, for example, that's a pretty dense area and those lots are smaller than what our current minimum lot standards are. So if a development was to occur between there and Highway 1, where there's a lot of townhouses or small multiplexes, then we might want a level 2 assessment in order to ensure that there's not going to be well interference and that there's actual good quality water. And you're not going to interfere with the folks on Rockwell Drive. In conclusion, as per council's direction, staff have developed a new zone for the use around Eddie's Variety along Highway 1 in Mount Uniacke. Staff have also developed an option to allow for increased residential density through a new Mount Uniacke Comprehensive Development District designation and zone. If the zones are included in the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy, residents impacted areas will receive an opportunity to comment on the new designations and zones as part of updates to the East Hansel Fisher Community Plan after the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy has been adopted by council. So basically, what PAC would be doing, and council, they'd be giving us authorization to include this information into the final draft. If the final draft is accepted, then we move in to then having public information meetings again in the community and go through the steps for adoption of the actual amendments. And recommendation, include the new Mount Uniacke Mixed Use Center Overlay MUMC designation and zone outlined in the Uniacke SPS motion C-24-443 report be included in the draft Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Report and include the new Mount Uniacke Comprehensive Development District designation and zone outlined in this report be included in the draft Uniacke Secondary Report. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie, for the report. Wishing to speak, Councilor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. First off, well done. We gave you guys a question. We presented you with a problem, and you came back with an answer of this is how you do something. So I'm very pleased and good work. I like the fact that you have the protections in there when it comes for the rezoning, and I look at this as the first step, right? We need to have a first step done before we go anywhere else. The only thing I look at is the overlay zone. I think it would be more, if you want to look at the beneficial and the uses, if you look at the north side of the number 1 from the span of Etter Road, from the first entrance to Etter Road to the second entrance of Etter Road, and then where you currently have it around Eddie's Variety, Westlake Avenue, Lake Drive, and Mill Road, it would work because some of these exact buildings that you talk about are exactly what business owners say they need closer to where they're at. They need places for the people to stay. They want places for them to be able to go eat lunch and do different things. So there's been, I think, if that overlay zone was expanded down to meet the other side of Etter Road, connecting to where the Big E's pub is, that would kind of go from Big E's pub all the way down to the other side on the north side of the number 1. That would be my preference. I'm going to let the other councillor weigh in to see if he agrees, and then if not, I'll make a motion afterwards.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Debbie, I agree with Councillor Perry, and I have my own question too. So, can you show us where the watershed is now, like in this area? Which it's all this area in the watershed?
Yes, in the,
Pockwalk watershed?
oh, the Pockwalk watershed. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't have that.
That would all be in the supply area, not the protected area.
Yeah, so it's in the Pockwalk water supply area. So this blue, I don't know if you can see it here. So this blue line here, where there's kind of just a single lines through it, that is the Pockwalk water supply area. And I don't have a map showing the full extent of that
Oh, no,
with
no,
me today.
But this whole area is inside, right? Like,
Yeah,
So
so-
my question is, will this impact the approval from the environment for septic, for multi or like for this zone?
Through you, Mr. Chair, from environment, I don't think so. What it would do is impact your land use regulations. So that Pockwalk water supply zone, for example, doesn't allow hydrocarbon storage. So if you're doing a gas station in that area, you wouldn't be able to do a gas station because of the water supply area. But it shouldn't impact your septic systems because those are
Yeah,
designed.
so this area is limited to what you can put, so not all the uses that you listed below from the MUC zone here will be applied over there.
To you, Mr. Chair, most of them should. As I said, I did take out the gas station
Oh, okay.
ones.
Okay, you did, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, for example, a lot of them have nothing to do with your water supply. For example, your animal vets, your bank or financial institutions, business support services, daycares, educational services, gambling industries, government offices.
Okay,
None of those are going to be
Sounds good to me.
detrimental
Thank
to
you.
your water supply.
You got it.
Is that all, Counselor? Thank you. Counselor Perry,
I am going to move the recommended motion that Planning Advisory Committee recommends the council authorize staff to include the new Mount Uniac Mixed Use Center Overlay, MUMC designation and zone as outlined in the Uniac SPS motion, C-24-443 report, be included in the first draft, the secondary planning strategy, stretching from the two entrances of Eder Road on the north side of the number one, and authorize staff to include the new Mount Uniac Comprehensive Development District designation and zone outlined in the Uniac SPS motion, C-24-43 report be included in the draft Uniac Secondary Planning Strategy report.
question, Debbie, with the part that you had about the two roads, is that okay in the motion?
It's under, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Nobody left to speak, we'll go to the vote. Yeah, Eli's second. Walter. And the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Debbie. Next item on the agenda, single access options report, and Director Woodford's going to give us an update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we need to go through all the information that was presented last month.
Okay,
So I'll just, hold on here. I got the wheel of death here. Won't turn. Just- Process. I'm not sure why that won't advance. Oops. There we go. Why is that not showing?
Go to duplicate slideshow.
Hmm?
Go to your thing down there.
This?
There you go, up there. If you want it big here, go display and duplicate.
All right. Sorry about that. So what I did, I just sort of summarized some things from last month as well as an update. Obviously, this was extensively debated last month. No direction was given to staff at that meeting regarding any additional research or policy development. However, PAC directed that it simply be brought back. Since that time, there was a meeting set up by the MLA with staff attending as well as the warden, with landowners, a couple of landowners and representatives of landowners from property in the Grand Lake area. And there was a letter posted, signed by John Kugel and John Paul Sear, with their request to consider changes that would allow development to continue in this area by developing a municipal system of road classification instead of relying on the provincial one. And the intent would be to reclassify Renfrew and Monte Vista from local roads to collectors or arterials to enable continued subdivision. And they had a second option there, which would really, it amounts to the same thing, which would be you would only have this restriction in place for road, J-class roads with the 50 kilometer an hour speed limit. At the end of the day, it wouldn't change anything. You still have this area with one way in and out, but you would look at the roads. I guess the thinking being that these roads are built to a higher standard with a higher speed limit, so therefore egress might be a little bit easier. So staff are requesting that PAC review those options presented in January, as well as this additional request, and provide direction to staff on next steps. And again, the options were to allow development beyond 100 lots if a vulnerability assessment is done and shows the risk to be low or moderate. But it would also limit dwellings to 150 in unserviced areas and 300 in serviced areas. Option 2 would be to maintain the 100 lot limit, but allow up to 150 dwelling units in unserviced and 300 dwellings in serviced areas. Option 3 would be to explore the use of emergency accesses to enable further development. And the fourth, to keep current regulations in place, limiting development to 100 lots with only one access, and basically let the development industry install those second accesses when it financially makes sense. So that's the summary, Mr. Chair, and I guess we look for direction.
Thank you, staff. Councilor Musa, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, when you did the vulnerability studies, did staff go drive on that road, or what kind of method did you use to, like, I could talk about a couple roads in Mount Uniacke, like the Old Mines Road, it's all hardwood, and it's all boggy on wetland on both sides, and the vulnerability study came as 75 or 79%. So, and in your study, you said, like, where is hardwood, it's low vulnerability. So I wonder how that study was conducted. And the Uniacke Mines Road, it's mostly like shrubs, like there's no trees whatsoever on the north side, and all homes have like landscaped in the front, like there's, I don't think should be 79% as you put it. Maybe the bigger, like I have no problem with if you said like the Coxcomb Lake, because the trees are over the road, like they're connected over the road. I could say this as 100%, not 75. But the Uniacke Mines Road, the collector road, is not 75%. I could speak about those two roads. I don't travel the Monte Vista, unfortunately, but I don't know what kind of state is it in. But I could speak about those two roads in Mount Uniac, and I think staff, when they want to do something, at least go look at those roads. Like, and you're talking about Old Mines Road is only 800-meter long, and it's not even 200 yards away from the fire department. I don't know if that is consideration you should take. Like, in all ways, you look at it, it should never be 75%. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there were a number of factors looked at in those vulnerability assessments. I'm just trying to find the list here. Where is it? Oh, yeah. So there were, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 factors. Access egress was one of them. So, and we didn't really make any distinction between whether it was a Class J road or a Class G road. If there was only one way in or out, that was given a certain number of points. The number of impacted residents, fire protection, so whether there were fire hydrants or water bodies like lakes nearby. The road length did come into consideration. The longer it was, the higher the vulnerability. Water courses, if there are any water courses crossing the road, then that would be an issue as well, because things can get washed out and people trapped. The type of forest cover and the amount was also a consideration. So whether and softwood is worse than hardwood. So in the case of Old Mines, it got you a 4 out of 5 on forest cover. Slope is another one because fire burns faster upslope than downslope. And a portion of Rockwell Drive was constructed on top of a slope. So again, in that case, it got 4 out of 5. So, and the higher the number, the worse. So those were the factors. So I guess to answer your question, the only thing that I think you mentioned that wasn't really part of that was the actual class of the road. It's just whether or not there's one way in or out, any water courses crossing it, and how long it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got some questions to staff. I wasn't here when this decided some time ago, but I got a little confused about the whole thing. What would it take for this project to be reduced down to a less than 75%? I know water's an issue. There's a dry hydrant apparently within 300 meters of the property to bring this down so that we could possibly look at a development. And I know the MLA is involved, but the road that goes through there is a provincial road, not a municipal road. And is he willing to, has he showed any indication to try to help us with that? Or put some input onto that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure what particular items could be tweaked to get you under that 75 on each of these. I guess we'd have to go back and look, if you had a dry hydrant or what have you, those kinds of things would help, I guess. But as you can see from the slide here, the Grand Lake area is at 75 now, and staff are recommending only if it was low or moderate would you allow further subdivision. So it's pretty far from that. Having said that, council can set its own threshold if you want to allow, up to high and just not very high. Then that would open all this for development. So it's really your tolerance for risk.
Because I know in the previous report, there was suggested putting, upgrading the road and putting a crossroad in through the subdivision, and the contract developer did not want to do that, so that would be the only option to help. I'm still confused in the whole thing, John, I guess.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Mr. Chair. If a second access is added, then absolutely that changes everything. You're no longer at 100 lots on one access. But you're saying somebody didn't want to put it in?
Apparently there was one question in there that with the subdivision with the 20 dwellings, that there would be a crossroad going through it to help break it up.
Well, that would be fine, Mr. Chair, but at the end of the day, what does that come out to? Is it still work off of
Still-
one access to the rest of the world?
So really the only way would be to create a second road.
Yeah.
That's all I have for now, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. Not disputing the criteria you used. There was a few other things that may have been able to use. You can pick one for each of them, right? Like I could go to Old Mines Road and say, there's a lake right across from the intersection. The fire hall is just down the road and they have a dry hydrant there. Plus their trucks would be loaded with water. Another half a kilometer down the road, there's 2 accessible lakes that could be used to pump water. That's in the event of a catastrophic. Were the local fire departments consulted at all for any of their concerns in providing fire service to these areas where they think it would be a risk?
Mr. Chair, no. This was a, go ahead, David.
Not partisans, but they have been consulted.
Yeah. As part of this study, no, this was really a tabletop exercise. In the past, as with all developments, we do consult our local fire services and, for example, they've expressed concerns in the Uniac area with how far it is to get to Long Lake, for example, the development in that area. So we've heard concerns like that over the years.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking like that would help, like your vulnerability assessment is this, but it would really help, I think, not only the public, but everybody around the table here understand that might be your vulnerability assessment, but the local fire department should say, look, we have no concerns in that area. We have it covered. It's definitely doable, or they might share concerns or actually might even add a concern to an area that you think is actually low, and they could say, listen, the terrain, the access to water is very limited there. It makes it more difficult. So I really think that might be the one missing piece that would give some clarity, because they're the first ones that are going to have to respond. That's what I would say as far as the criteria and going through this. The other thing is, when I look at your jurisdictional scan, nobody else is doing this. All of our neighbors, Colchester, West Hants, they're not doing it. They're not even looking at it. So I don't know why we're so hopped up to try and get there. We had the fire smart people in here, and as soon as you build homes on a larger property and they clear the property around it, you mitigate the risk. The problem is when the properties are stacked close together. So all of these areas, I believe every one of these, with the exception of Elmwood, is on service. Am I correct? Or Cali Lane might be service too, is it? So Cali Lane and Elmwood are the only two that are not service, that are service. So all the rest of them are on service. So you would have a larger footprint and more clear in that set. So I'm not in favor of restricting to 100 homes, unless something was to come back and say this area is a potential danger. But I would need confirmation from the fire services that they are worried about this area, not just what we think around here, because I think that's the most important thing. The first people that are going to be there to fight and save it should have a say at this as well. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could answer. So the councilor's right. Nobody else is doing this, whereby they're trying to do a vulnerability assessment and then use that to regulate land development. But there are other municipalities, like HRM does restrict the number of units and dwellings off of one access. In terms of consulting the local fire services, I guess if that's the direction to take this information and send it out to them, we'll absolutely do that and get their opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, staff. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Well, we have debated this last meeting, and we're back at it again. And I did sit in on the meeting that was held earlier, simply because I felt if the provincial government was going to be representative, then municipal government who's voting on this should be there to hear what's said as well, along with our staff. Since then, I've gone over this again. I've gone over it in my mind many times. And for me, at the end of the day, what I'm getting all hopped up about is safety. And I would point out that the Tantallon area, they weren't on services. They were large lots. So there's no safe guarantee of large size lots. And rightly or wrongly, me personally, in order to sleep at night, I have to come down on the side of safety. And it's not that I want to impede development or anything like that. But you can't unsee something once you've seen it. And I guess, as I said, I've gone over it, and I know that in places on services, there are fire hydrants. And in other places, there could be dry hydrants. And I thought, well, that would probably make some difference. But then I thought, depending on where a fire was to start, you would have to be able to get your fire apparatus to the fire hydrants or to the dry hydrants and safely back out with those volunteer firefighters. And also, depending if a wildfire, and maybe it will never happen, but we don't know that anymore. If a wildfire were to happen, what happens if it involves our water treatment plants or whatever? We have to be able to get water to those hydrants for them to be useful. So there's a whole lot more around there than that. And I guess I listened to the developers and I read all the options again, but at the end of the day, I just thought, I have to come down on the side of safety. Maybe council won't agree with me and you'll say I'm wrong, and that's okay. It will be the will of council. But in order to try and get some focus to this discussion and move it along, I am going to move option 4. That we make no changes to the current regulations and allow for the development community to build second accesses to the identified areas when development pressure warrants the cost of constructing the second access.
Do we have a seconder? Second by Deputy Warden McPhee. On before the motion. Councilor Rhino?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, when this first started years ago, it was to limit a subdivision for 100 lots, which made sense. And it still, to me, makes sense. If you're going to put a subdivision in anywhere, it should, after 100 lots, it should, and I'm going to stick with that. I don't think we really have, should be limiting development on provincial roads. Whether they have one way in or one way out, I really don't think. I think vulnerability studies are just another cost that's gonna have to be absorbed by the developer, right? I just don't see that. We're all bending to shake about Hamlet's Plains. Well, like somebody said, it may not happen again. Well, an earthquake may happen. What are we doing to protect them about that? I just have a problem. Nobody else is doing this. I don't think we have any jurisdiction really off provincial roads, and I still say if somebody wants to put a subdivision off the Renfrew Road or wherever, then over 100 should have that second access back out to the provincial roads. I really do believe that. They say we're open for business, and I've heard that acronym through around this quite a bit. I really think that this is going to close it down, and I'm not in favor of it. I think we should go back to where it was, and I don't know how we really got there. It must have got by me somehow. But I think if we just have it for the subdivisions, then we're good. Because we have the fire smart programs, we got different programs, and fire departments, I know actively ours is, if we have problems with water supply, we go actively looking for places to create dry hydrants. So I don't know I can't speak for other fire departments, but that's what we do down there. So I just don't, I think it's really, I don't like limiting development around on provincial roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Tingley wishes to speak, and I'm not sure how I get there, so I'll leave that to CEO.
Okay, through the chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not going to speak very long. I agree with Warden Rolston and Councillor Perry. I'd like to see some more information so we could have a little more confidence of what we're dealing with here. you know, there was a study done on that Tantalum fire, and then it happened. The municipality's responsible for planning, and I just wouldn't be comfortable making this decision. I don't want to get in the way of development either, but I just am not in favor of this motion without more information from the fire department and perhaps even natural resources, but some authority that can give us some comfort over the risk here. That's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolston?
Thank you. I'd just like to take this opportunity to reiterate, we are not the only people doing this. We may be the only people that are doing extra studies. But as the Director of Planning has said, there are other municipalities out there who certainly limit the amount of lots on single access roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Counselor Hebb?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, option 4 is the part I don't quite understand, is to build second accesses to the identified areas when development pressure warrants the cost of construction. What would be entitled there, when development pressure wants the cost of consultant?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, basically when it's worth it to a developer to, you know, go to the expense of adding that second access where they think they can sell enough lots at a high enough price to pay for that and then still make money.
Okay, so where does the 100 lot rule, does it still apply there?
Yes, it would. So if nothing changes, you're still at 100 lots, and developers would have to basically make sure that before they go over that 100, they have a second access.
So if they were developing with 100 lots and they wanted to develop another lot with only 50, they would have to make sure they have a second exit there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's right. So that's why, again, it would be when they think it's worth it to do so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Merriman?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, and looking at the jurisdictional scan and seeing some of the different options there, I'm really drawn to look at the Halifax model and, you know, maybe surprisingly wondering perhaps why it's not one of our options, because, you know, when you look at it, my understanding is, you know, basically, you know, one access on 100, and then after that, if you're looking at more, you know, you're up to a maximum 300 if there's a second access. So that's quite simple to explain, really. You know, so I kind of like the look of that. It seems logical to me. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the CAO for her comments.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, back to Councillor Hebb. So that, what John described is if there was a new subdivision going in on its own, but the vulnerability study, the areas that were looked at already have met that 100 lot rule. So that's not, it wouldn't just be as simple as building another way out of the subdivision. It would be building another way out of that area.
So this wouldn't apply to the one that's already there?
It would apply to those areas like Uniacke, Piggott, Grand Lake, Old Mines. There would be no development permitted in those areas unless there was another exit past the development,
Because they already have 100 lots now?
because they already
basically?
have 100 lots. So that, just want to make sure it's not just about subdivisions. It would, because of the definitions of the roads and that policy, those areas would still be cut off from development past the 100 lots.
Thank you for the
There'd be nothing
clarification. Thank you.
permitted further.
Okay, everybody else, if you want to have a motion, you want to be a little bit of leeway. Counselor Musa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So John, like, what's gonna happen for the already approved subdivision of those roads that we're banning now? So what's gonna happen? Like, Morning Breeze, whatever, like that development of Old Mines Road, they have approval for 121 lots or something.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, if it's already approved, then nothing changes. That approval stands.
So if they approved 121 lots and they create them, can they apply for a building permit on them?
Sorry, can they apply for?
Building permit on them over the 100
Yes,
lots?
once those lots exist, you're not going to be restricted on the number of building permits.
So they're not existed yet. We approved them, but they're in a they're phasing them out.
So if a subdivision already has tentative or final approval, then no regulations that we change now will impact, or any current ones will change, unless you went with the restrictions on the number of dwelling units, which if the motion on the floor wouldn't do that. So it would still just restrict the number of lots.
So if you go over 100, you're good.
If you've already, as I said, have tentative or final approval for that subdivision.
Okay. And about the second access, if our bylaws prohibit that, because in a rural use, you cannot build another road. And to be able to do that, you gotta go through like 100 development agreement to rezoning agreement to be able to build those roads. How that's gonna happen? Like, we're shutting down on both sides, like in the Grand Lake, everything rural is RU zone. So how many lots you have to change to be able to build that second access? Even the road, the provincial road that exists, if somebody come and they want to turn it into municipal road, we shut them down. So we're shutting down everything. Like, it's not I think that's not in my area. I don't care what happened there. So that's totally not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay. Counselor Dixon?
Thank you to the chair. Going back to the Renfrew Road, this is owned by the province. And at one time, that road, you could drive cars through from one end to the other. Why wouldn't the province take consideration, if our MLA is coming to a meeting supporting this, to invest some money in the road to support the second exit? I don't know how many people have gone through that road, but in years, you could drive cars through. They've neglected their maintenance on the road. If the government, if the province comes up to bring it up to standard, we wouldn't be having these discussions every other month.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, it's a K-class road, which means it's unmaintained. It's owned by the province, but unmaintained. So I think that would be their answer, that it's an unmaintained K-class road. So they're not going to invest in it unless the status of that road changes.
But if he wants this project done, and I mean, I'd like to see the project happen, but to do it without a second road, I can't support it. Maybe it's mine. Maybe it's time for him to call. I'll call him myself.
Is that all, Counselor?
Thank you, yes.
Counselor McPhee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking for further clarification to Councillor Hebb's clarification, which was part of what I was thinking. So this was done just on the Grand Lake, or if we start on the Grand Lake Road from the far end of it, from the gated area, and you come out to the intersection with the Renfrew Road. If you turn right, you're on an H class, and on a K class if you turn left. So how far are we counting the houses? Because really, that drives as one road. So do we come right out to the next road, which would be the Horn Settlement Loop? Is that what we're looking at for the count, and restricting any development for that whole section?
Just a sec here. Yeah. Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, you come out to the intersection with the Horn Settlement Road.
Okay, that's,
Yeah.
so there's over 100 homes there now, so we're basically saying you can't develop a subdivision or any more lots there.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, there are right now, or as when this report was done, there are 172 dwellings in there now.
From the Horn Settlement Road
Yes.
in right through.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and that's what we're. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll go to Senator Councilor Cole, since she hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So were you referring to from the overpass out, or just from where Renfrew Road starts?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, not the overpass. It's literally where the old Horn Settlement Road comes out and meets Renfrew Road.
Okay, because I was going to say, you can go up the Nine Mile River Road too. So I do see merit in what we talked about back when we talked about the development across from Robert Scott Drive in this, and you know, these densely populated developments where the traffic is really slow coming out of them. I just never really visualized it coming to these different class roads, you know, where the traffic is where the speed limit is higher, and I just never visualized it coming to all this. And I guess that's where we're ending up right now. I do see merit in, you know, these densely populated, I'm gonna repeat myself. I do see merit in some of it, but I just don't feel comfortable making a blanket statement right across the whole board and the ramifications of that. I just can't see past all that. Thank you.
Is that all, Counselor?
Yes.
Counselor,
Thank
I
you.
know, new?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to staff. So, John, so basically from the Horn Settlement Road, that loop, there's 172 dwellings into where? Is that in Monte Vista?
Through, Mr. Chair, yes, going through the gate and including basically everything in that traffic shed, from Horn Settlement all the way to the tip of Monte Vista,
So,
and all the subdivisions off to the sides of those.
so we're done. There's no development.
Until, well, under the current rules, that's right, unless there's a second access.
So that this motion is not gonna do that, because I can't see any developer gonna try to create a road to give a second access that would be cost prohibitive, I think there, like, I just say, we say we're open for business, now we just shut all development down there, and that was not the purpose when this first went in and got morphed into what it is currently, so that's my thought, I can't support this.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolston, anything new?
Thank you. Just speaking in support of the motion that's on the floor, that just maintains what we are currently doing and have been doing. It's not changing anything at this time. I understand that. And I just feel myself that that's, of the options presented and the discussion we've had, to me, there's still no guarantee of safety of anyone, anywhere, really, when it comes to fire. And it doesn't improve the safety of what's already there, but it's a starting point. And no, I don't want to end development any more than anyone else does. But I guess I'll just repeat that for me, if it comes down to possibly saving lives or increasing development, I'm coming down on the side of saving lives. Thank you.
Counselor Moose, anything new
Yes, sir. Thank you.
to the motion?
So, John, now, if you have a lot with only lake access by boat, and we are approving development on those lots, so why boat cannot be a second access for those people to escape in case of fire or anything else? If you're I know Halifax, they're approving on island, so the only way to go to the island is by boat. And if we're concerned about safety, all those lakes, could anyone have have a boat? If not, his neighbor have a boat. So I think that should be considered as a second access.
Through you, Mr. Chair, when we approve a lake access lot, their presumption is there are no roads. As a second access, I guess we hadn't considered that, and it's really, the regulations kick in when you're creating roads. So you're basically looking for two exits, road exits.
Not everybody has
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hebb, anything new?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to staff. Councilor Moose has brought up one question I was going to bring up too. Is any consideration to the part of the Monte Vista Road, there by the gate, there is a private woodlot road that eventually brings you out to the Beaver Bank Road? Was any consideration given there? I mean, the road is already there, it's not up to standard by any mean, but I'm sure that could be brought up to some extent for a second access. Was that ever considered when doing this report?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it was, and actually that's your option 3, which, I guess could work with some of the other ones. And it was also discussed in that meeting that there are forest roads that connect off the old Renfrew. But, I think we would have to investigate that to see what standard they are and if they're upgraded, who's going to maintain them, seasonally and otherwise. So there are a lot of ifs there if we're going to rely on those to continue development.
But it still is an option though.
Of course.
Still, yeah. I know, I've been over most of those roads, and I mean, a lot of them you can take a car on most of the way, but they're not plowed in wintertime or anything, but unless they're working in the woods in there. So to me, that would be a major consideration to look forward to in those roads. The roads are already there. Whether the developer would want to bring them up to a standard, and if it's just a second access, what does the standard have to be? It doesn't have to be a perfectly road, so to me, that's a big excess.
Not to complicate the issue more, but Mr. Chair, we actually have an example of that when we did the development agreement for Cottage Country at Long Lake. There actually are specs in there for an emergency access that they had to create. It's something the fire department there actually asked for, so we put it in the development agreement. So there is a precedent, I guess, for that thinking. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Perry to the motion?
Yes, to the motion, Mr. Chair. Speaking against the motion, John just brought up a good point. That was an area where the experts in safety were consulted, and the decision was made after talking to the people who are in charge of safety. We're making decisions on safety here, and we are not the safety experts. We have not got that we have a vulnerability assessment here. We do not have a safety assessment, and we do not have the input from the people who would have to respond to any emergency. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Nobody left to speak, so we'll vote on the motion, which is option 4 on the screen. Make no change to the current regulations and allow for the development community to build second accesses to the identified areas where development pressure warrants the cost of constructing the second exit. That is the motion, Councilor Tingley, that we're voting on. And the motion was defeated, 7-4.
Because you have to have Counselor Tingley to the,
But he would give me on 11, wouldn't he?
we have public.
Okay. So
7 to 5.
7-5. With Councilors Councilor McPhee, myself, Councilor Marion, and Warden Rolston voting in favor.
And Counselor Tingley.
And Councilor Tingley voting in favor. 5-4, 7 against. Thank you, staff. Let's go back. There is a recommended motion with the report. What is your wish?
somebody else.
Councilor Cole?
Well, I'm just looking at these motions and not feeling warm and fuzzy about those either. I feel like we're constantly bringing up different things to this that may encourage us to come up with something better. And it could be the different class roads, you know, things like that different topics that are coming to the table every time we discuss this. Maybe we need to go back and look at it again. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but I just don't know that I'd be supporting those proposed motions either. It's a complicated topic for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Warden Ralston?
Thank you. Just to take the opportunity to point out that although a lot of the discussion has centered around the Renfrew and that issue, that this is a larger issue around multiple parts of the municipality, all of whom may be a little bit different for whatever reasons. And that, for example, any of the options that were provided here, none of those would solve the Renfrew issue, if I understand correctly. None of those options that are in this report would change that. But I realize this is a larger discussion, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to point that out. I don't know where we go from there. I had my kick at the can. It's someone else's turn now. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councilor Musa?
Part of me think what said Councilor Perry, that we should consult with the fire department about all those roads and see where they go, where they lead us to. So safety is their concern and their job to secure all those. And I'm pretty sure we had 2 fires already after the fire in Talon, in Mount Uniacke. We had fire on each side of Highway 1, and they were contained in less than 2 hours. 3 hours they were done. Like if we want to go by the speculation that softwood burn fast, like there's a lot of lakes in the area. There's a lot of good fire departments, and we lived it, and the fire department were up to their task. Like they shut the fire down in less than 4 or 5 hours. And they were in a very no access area. Like they were not in an accessible area. One in the new development on West Lake, and one at the road entrance. And both were caused by brush fire. And the fire department, they had no concern. Like all the fire department came in and fought the fires. And I think we should consult with them before we shut down all the development that we need development everywhere, and we want to find a way to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Jordan Cole?
Thank you. Just to add to that, it's not that I'm just thinking about, areas closer to home. I am thinking about the Mount Uniacke area and different areas that, say, for example, someone's bringing forward the fact that maybe exiting by watercraft is considered a form of exit. Or, we've tossed this around numerous times, but every time we do, there's more ideas and more information coming to the table. But I think it's something that we really do need to get the fire service involved, not just make a decision based on without really diving into the topics that, someone else may have more to add than what we're capable of giving in different areas of it, like, say, the safety. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Deputy Warden McPhee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say first, It's nice to think that everybody that lives on a lake or on these roads is gonna have a boat, but we can't guarantee that everybody's gonna have a boat. Also, they could have a water, a seaplane, and get out that way, but I don't think that we can guarantee that either. The way people are gonna get out is by land on roads. So I think we should stick with that, rather than start thinking of, people could kite fly out or whatever. So I would like to move the recommended motion. Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council authorize staff to prepare amendments to the subdivision bylaw that would permit over 100 lots be created on a single access road where a vulnerability assessment shows that the road has a very low to moderate risk assessment, and authorize staff to prepare amendments to the official community plan that permits a maximum of 300 dwelling units on a single access road in a GMA serviced by municipal water and wastewater, and prepare amendments that would permit a maximum of 150 dwelling units on a single access in all areas of East Hants not serviced by municipal water and wastewater, and authorize staff to schedule a public information meeting.
Seconder? Do we have a seconder? I know. Do we have a seconder? Okay, no seconder for that motion?
Okay, I would still like to just continue speaking for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
I see that nobody wants to second that, and that's fine with me, although it addresses some of the concerns that councilors had brought up. So it's really hard to see what council's thinking here. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Perry, something new?
Yes. I'm going to try and piece together a motion here. I move that staff consult through the Fire Advisory Committee or the East Hants Fire Service for input from the fire departments in all local areas as to their comfort and concerns with developments and roads in their area. Does that make sense? I'm missing something there. My brain's just not working right now for a second.
Recommendations.
Yeah, and provide the recommendations back on the access if they have any concerns with roads in their area.
Mr. Chair, if I could just get clarification. So do you want us to present or share with them the vulnerability assessment, get their opinion on that? Or just direct them to our policy of 100 lot maximum, and these are the areas impacted, and get their opinion on that?
My idea would be like, here's our policy, here's a vulnerability assessment we done. Do you agree, disagree? Do you see any issues with this road, this road, this road, this area, this area, this area? Based upon your expertise in the fire service and the community you serve.
Okay.
I so move.
So moved in second, but I'll give the CEO a chance to weigh in the lengthy discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we can go and ask the fire departments their opinion on how they feel about development, extra development in these areas that have been identified. I don't think that they're going to say one way or the other whether council should allow development or not. Is my understanding that, so by the conversation that's happened in the room and from last month, council really needs to decide something fundamentally. What level of risk are you willing to take on these developments? So you let them develop, you don't, something happens, something may never happen. There's all of those issues that are coming at council for this issue. Is the intent of the conversations with the fire department to get more local knowledge to help council decide where their risk tolerance is? You're not asking us to get the fire departments to say yay or nay on development. So it's that risk tolerance that you're trying to get a sense of?
Yes, because I can tell 200 meters away from one of the high-risk, high-vulnerability roads with a lake across the street from it is going to tell you they have no concern with that development whatsoever because they can be there in 10 seconds if a fire breaks out because they're that close. And that's not parlayed here. And under the current regulations, you know, it's going to stop any new development off there, which I guarantee they would probably have, they don't see it as a safety concern. And other areas they might not see. And I believe every department, it's understanding not about development, it's about their capabilities and where they feel comfortable and uncomfortable. They may say, we feel uncomfortable in this area because of terrain, right? And that might be something else that we need to consider because in the wintertime, terrain can have an impact. You can't get vehicles in and out. Right now is a good example with all the ice. So there's a lot of factors that go into public safety, and just arbitrarily saying 100 units or 100 dwellings is just one factor. And if we're going to seriously be doing something under the guise of public safety, we need to capture all the matrices, not just one.
Thank you, Counselor. Remind everybody that this response time is getting to the fire station and then getting to the scene. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. I have no problem ever listening to input from our volunteer fire service. However, I would not be comfortable with putting the onus on making a recommendation to us on a decision of this from our volunteer fire service because that's not their job. That's not what they signed up for. They are volunteers from a variety of backgrounds who do their very best to serve our communities in times of fire, accidents, anything at all. And while, as I said, I'm very happy to hear from them, I would not support having them try to take the heat off us and make this decision for us because, you know, when it comes right down to it, the buck stops here, folks. We have to make this decision based on the information we have. If we apparently don't like anything that's in front of us, then we have to put our heads together and figure out something to ask staff to come back and do. And if that involves hearing from some of the fire departments to gather some more information, that's great. But I truly believe that we're at a spot where we're not any further ahead right now than we were when we started this discussion. And I think in order for staff to do anything else for us, we have to tell staff what we want them to do, what we're looking for. And I'm not sure we know yet. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if we should have a workshop of some kind or I don't have the answers. I'm sure the development community is not all that excited that we don't have the answers. But I don't see us getting to an answer by going round and round, which is why I did put the one motion out to try and focus the discussion on at least one thing, and now that's done, and apparently the recommended motion is not favored by council. So, you know, folks, I'll support the motion to go out and talk to the fire departments just as an information gathering tool. And after that, then I think we've got to put the pedal to the metal and come up with something here. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. I'll go to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarity, Councillor Perry, you mentioned the Fire Advisory Committee and the East Hants Fire Service both. I think your intention is that we talk to the local fire departments that serve the areas that are mentioned in the report. Is that?
Yes, whichever was the best method, and it is for that information gap. They're not making decisions, they're giving us information so we can make a decision.
I would almost suggest you talk to the entire fire service because of mutual aid agreements that exist between those departments.
We could, I think there's a chiefs meeting coming up in a week or two, so we can bring it up at that meeting as well and look for their guidance on who should be giving us guidance.
Go ahead.
CAO mentioned what I was going to mention. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Rhino.
Yep. I'm gonna, in order for me to vote on this motion, I have to clarify for myself the motion that Counselor McPhee tried to put forth with lack of a seconder. And what I would like clarification on, that motion where a vulnerability assessment shows that the road has a very low to moderate risk assessment. So any of those, I think it was 7 or 9 roads that were listed there before, 5 of those roads would not, if that motion went through, 5 of those roads wouldn't even get any more development on that at all, would they? Because I think there was one that was low and one that was moderate, if I'm reading this correctly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't remember how many, sounds right.
Yeah, so even with that motion, that would not, because you've got so many 5 at high vulnerability right there. Right, so those wouldn't even be considered, even with risk assessment.
There's no
Correct?
numbers in.
Yeah, okay, so I got the,
Yeah, no actual number of dwelling units. Anyway, sorry.
so I was right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I-
so, you know, it's not doing nothing for development to me as a whole, and that's strange coming from me, because I'm very picky on my development, right? So I will support this motion, but I really think that we should go back to what it originally started. A subdivision alone, over 100 lots, should have 2 accesses, whether it's on a public road, private road, or whatever, 2 accesses to that private or public or municipal road. That's how I feel we should go back to.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I mean, that's essentially the request that came in since January, that to treat, a Renfrew, for example, not as a local road, but as a collector, and therefore you could have multiple subdivisions that connect to it, and you would only start counting 100 once you leave the Renfrew Road. But again, you have that, there is some vulnerability there because there is only one way in or out to the rest of the world.
I understand that there's vulnerability, but there's vulnerability across the province here, right? And I don't, is there any other municipality that are restricting on provincial roads on accesses? There is?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, HRM has
HRM.
the restriction. Yeah.
Has that since been Tantown, or Ham's Plains Tantown fires?
Sorry, I didn't catch that last
Has
bit.
that been since the Ham's Plains Tantown fires?
No, it was prior to that.
Okay, and that's the only municipality that does?
I think that's it. Moncton has kind of a more convoluted
No,
system.
I'm talking,
Yeah.
I'm not talking foreign lands, I'm talking.
Locally, through you, Mr. Chair,
Nova
yes,
Scotia.
HRM was the one that we found, yeah.
Okay, so it's only that, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what would that look like for the Mount Uniacke area? Because I'm not personally familiar with it, but when you talk about your lake areas, are those considered subdivisions, just more large lot rural subdivisions
This should be to the motion about the fire department.
to the fire department? Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Would you reread the motion for clarity since some might have forgot? Okay, CAO, just a minute. Go ahead, CAO.
Move that staff consult through the Fire Advisory Committee or Fire Service, which we've since determined would be the chiefs and the local fire departments. Consult with comfort and concerns with development on the roads in the areas outlined in the report.
That is the motion before you, since. Counselor, Deputy Warden McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I can't say that I feel comfortable going out and asking the fire departments, not because I don't think they're doing a great job as volunteers or well-trained, but they're trained to put out fires, they're trained to extricate people from car crashes and do things like that. I don't think it's, that they can give a risk assessment. And I don't feel comfortable putting them in that position that they should be trying to come up with, you know, any sort of comment on whether or not this, we're having a hard enough time dealing with this, to go out to a volunteer fire department and ask them this. I don't think that that's probably fair, so I don't think I can support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor, for your comments. Nobody left to speak, we'll go to the vote. We're going for Counselor T. The motion is passed with a 8-4, with Warden Rolston, Counselor Garden Cole, Counselor Merriman, Counselor McPhee, Deputy Warden McPhee voting nay. Thank you, staff. Yep, I see it. Counselor Hebb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before we leave the topic, I just like to make a comment. I think a lot of these areas have access by government roads as K roads. And I think we should be pressuring the government. We've seen what happened in the past with fires and floods and stuff, to start building some of these K roads up. Maybe not to a standard of they should be, but at least they could be used as a standard as a second access road. You know, Mount Uniac has a couple roads down there. The Grand Lake area also has a road there. And I know in Renfrew, for an example, a lot of the private landowners have great roads, but they got to drive over a crappy road, which is a K road, to get there. And in order for them to get there, I know that the Free Claim Bridge, they had to replace the decking on the bridge themselves. The government wouldn't even do that. So I think we got to pressure the government to help us out here, and we can't stop development because of this. So I think if there's anything we can do, I know pretty well without even asking, they're not going to spend any money on them. But if they want to help the public out and creating these scenarios where we can get people out, I think it's their obligation to start fixing up these roads. And anyway, that's my comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolston, comments?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Hebb on this one. I know we did try in the past and were not successful to have something similar done with these roads. But I do think there's a role here for the province to play. And the province is wanting to increase housing, and I have no doubt that the province wants the housing that's created to be safe. And I think they own roads that could help with that would allow us to refine our regulation and perhaps make things work better. So I'm going to move that we send a letter to the Provincial Department of Public Works, copying the MLAs and the Premier's office, and ask for reconsideration of the provincial government doing maintenance on provincially owned roads, K roads or other, to allow them to be accessible in times of emergency.
Been moved and second. Question. Question's being called. We'll go to the vote.
Somebody hasn't voted.
You voting?
And Councillor Tingle votes aye, is in favor.
And the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, staff. Any closing comments, John?
Nope, we're good.
And you know what? It's like my motion failed.
Councillor Garden Cole, you wish to speak?
I do. and I'm just gonna throw this motion out there because this is how I feel at this stage. I'd like to make a motion that we go back to raising our limit over 100 houses until we can further investigate different areas and come to a decision, a more informed decision on where we should go from here. But in the meantime, I think we should go back to raising it to over 100 houses.
Through Mr. Chair, I think it would be lots. The limit in the subdivision
lots.
bylaw is lots.
Okay, let's change it to lots. I think we should go back to over 100 lots until we can do a proper investigation of the reasons why we shouldn't have 100 lots. That's basically
And
my
just,
motion.
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, so
So I'm looking to raise the 100 lot
Yes.
limit, remove the 100 lot limit, and then do our further investigation on possibly reducing it in the future.
So, Mr. Chair, in order to enact that motion, we would then have to bring back amendments to your subdivision bylaw, so that would trigger that process. It would require public hearing and so on.
You're okay with that, Counselor?
No, I need to think about that for a minute.
While she's thinking about that, Mr. Chair, there is a limit on the number of dwelling units. Council by motion directed us not to enter into any development agreements with more than, is it 300? 300. Yeah. Is it 100? I thought it was 300 for some reason. 100 dwelling units when we're in a development agreement, and that was triggered by the FH development agreement in Lance. So there's a motion directing us in terms of development agreements, and then, which can be changed immediately, but the subdivision bylaw restriction on the number of lots would have to go through the formal adoption process.
Well,
Counselor?
I'm just thinking out loud here. I just feel like this is going to go on, and in the meantime, everything is being affected by it. We don't seem to be able to come to any decision on it, and everything is impacted by it in the meantime. But on the other hand, if it has to go through all that process, if it's not as simple as what I thought it was, then maybe we can go back and get staff too. But this just does not sit well with me. But
You withdrawing your motion?
no, I'm keeping the motion.
Seconded. It was, I think Counsel Musa seconded, so on before the motion. Warden Rolston?
Yes, speaking against the motion, I can't support this. This regulation of the 100 lots was brought in many, many years ago after a lot of discussion and a lot of soul searching and understanding that problems had been created and that we didn't want to create similar problems in the future. And I think that Elmwood subdivision was the catalyst for the whole thing at the time. I'm not sure if what the counselor means is not pretend we didn't see that our bylaw applied to roads other than subdivisions, such as Elmwood. But this motion would just remove that 100 lot limit everywhere, and it would be similar to what happened perhaps in Enfield when we changed the regulation on apartment buildings and that, and every developer out there rushed in before the new one took effect and got everything approved. And that's what would happen here. If we take that away, that opens up everything throughout the entire municipality, safe or not safe, things that have been researched and looked at before, things that have been in place for many years. In my opinion, it throws the baby out with the bathwater and puts people in unnecessary danger, and I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Deputy Warden McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't bother repeating everything the warden just said because that's basically what I was going to say, right down to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So we'll leave it at that. I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councilor Rhino. Well, I'll try to bring the baby back.
Wait, the baby's not done.
Well, just hold on now. Try to bring the baby back. I would propose an amendment that we maintain the 100 lot for subdivisions, newer subdivisions going forward, with no stipulation of a provincial road, only a subdivision of a normal road. You understand that, John? We're going back to where we were.
We're trying to pretend to unsee something. Can't do it.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, so you need to define subdivision for me.
Well, your definition of subdivision and mine are probably a little different. Subdivision is a lot of land that's divided into that, not an area. It's a piece of land that's divided into more than 100 lots, not an area, such as any other area, Renfrew, Mount Uniacke, or whatever. You understand?
I think so, but through you, Mr. Chair, I think the only way to implement that in any way that we could regulate would be to go back to the suggestion from the property owners in the Monte Vista area where we would reclassify the roads that they're connecting to. So now you have a subdivision connecting to we'll come up, I don't know how we'll do it, create a map and call those collectors or something, but you know, if you're connecting to Monte Vista or Renfrew or
Yes.
Uniacke Mines or whatever roads are impacted, you don't start counting until you leave that road.
But my only problem with that is how can we redefine collector and arterials when it's a provincial road and it's already been established, right?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, we could do that actually quite easily. That's their definition. That's not to say that it would match ours, or we could come up with different terminology to avoid confusion.
Well, I'm going to stick with my amendment, and if somebody else wants to throw whatever happens to this, I'll move this as an amendment. Thank you. Would you go over your amendment again? That the amendment would be to retain the 100 lot for subdivisions, not areas, not single access roads, subdivisions off those, any road, that they be made over 100 lots, they be maintained to bring the second access out to that road, whether it be a one-way road or what. Understand? To a main road, I guess is the best way. That will bring us back to where we originally were. And then we can discuss this again and again and try to bring it up. I move that amendment. Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Okay, it's been seconded. Staff, you understand the amendment?
I think so, Mr. Chair. But, and again, we would have to bring amendments back to show you how we're interpreting that, but I get the intent.
Okay, on for the amendment, Councilor Garden Cole.
Well, I'm on to withdraw my. I was on to withdraw my original motion, but I have a question to staff or anyone who happened to make a comment that might be directed to this. When you talk about years and years, trying to rewind years and years, am I missing something, or was this not something that we put in effect like a year and a half ago about the 100 lots?
No. Through you, Mr. Chair. So what happened, we've had this in effect for, I'm going to say 15 years.
Okay, so what went into effect to my knowledge?
Well, what changed was we realized we were approving subdivisions we shouldn't be. Because again, in our mind, a subdivision is as Councilor Rhino described. But when you actually read the subdivision bylaw carefully, no. Any area with one access, doesn't matter whether it's a provincial trunk or route, what have you, if there's only one way in or out, then it counts. You start counting lots from that point. So really, it was, I guess, staff coming to the realization that we were approving things we shouldn't be. We got a legal interpretation which backed that up, and that's what we've been doing since.
Okay, and And I wasn't thinking back that far because I was thinking of the most recent change that we had made and trying to reverse that to come up with something better and reverse that in the meantime. So I'm withdrawing my original motion, but how does that affect Keith's amendment to my motion?
I think you have to vote on the amendment, and then if you want to throw, isn't it? I don't know. I'll let the CAO.
I'll go to the CEO for clarification.
So I'll look for some clarification through you, Mr. Chairman. So your intention is to do nothing and keep it the way we are right now?
My intention is to withdraw my motion.
Okay, so we would have to defeat the,
We've got an amendment.
you'd
We've
have
got an
to,
amendment.
you'd have to vote on the amendment, and then if the seconder and the motion maker agreed to remove the motion,
Are we clear? Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Counselors, it is my opinion that we have reached an area where we're trying to create policy on the fly without staff reports, without good information, and I don't believe that that's ever a good thing to do. We've had lots of information here in this report, plus in many reports over the year. I'm speaking against the amendment, and should the motion remain on the floor, I will be voting against that too. I think where we're at now, if we're going, the motion is passed to consult with the fire service to see if they have any input. Some of them may have input, some of them may not. They may decline to give input, I don't know. But until we know that, I don't know where we sit. And I certainly suggest that what we've got in place now is what's been in place for 15 years. What happened a year and a half or a couple of years ago was that staff got a legal opinion that we were not interpreting what we had in place correctly. And since then, we've been interpreting according to the legal opinion that we received. I am not a believer in going against legal opinions. So from discussion around the room, there are many people who are looking for a way to go back to doing things the way we did them before. We can't unsee or unlearn what we've learned since then. Perhaps what we need to do, once we've heard from the fire service, is to ask staff if they can bring some options forward that would meet that goal. I don't know if that will pass or whether that will fail. I don't know if the majority of council, where they'll come down on safety and whether they, want to do that or not. But to me, that would be the cleanest way to do it, would be to ask staff what options, if any, there are. And it will require, public hearing, and it required a public hearing when we made the change 15 years ago or whatever to put it in place. But I think whatever we do, we want to try and do it right to the best of our ability, because contrary to opinion, we're not in the business of trying to stop developers from making money and developing their land. But neither are we in the business of putting current residents and future residents at unnecessary risk. So is there some kind of a compromise? Perhaps there is. I don't think we have it on the table today, and I don't think that the motion on the floor provides it. I think that the motion on the floor, I'm not sure we can even do it without going to public hearings and all that stuff, because it does change what the bylaw is now. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight. The director may have some comment on that, but anyway, at this point in time, I won't be supporting that. It has passed to get feedback from the fire departments. I will listen to any feedback that comes in. Maybe by that time, we all take away and think about it, and maybe we've got a motion of what we want staff to do for us to bring forward at the next meeting. But we are well over the time allocated on the agenda for this, and we're not a whole lot further ahead than what we were when we started. At some point, we have to do the rest of the business of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councilor Musa, something new to add to the conversation
Yeah, but not for the motion.
on the amendment, or,
Neither.
okay, I'll take you off for now. Councilor Marion?
Thank you, Chair. No, I just wanted to reiterate as well that on this particular issue, we've been at it for a while, and my capacity to, quickly assimilate new ideas on the fly without, really thinking about it and perhaps getting staff report and advice. If I vote contrary on some of these, you'll understand why I would prefer to hold off for perhaps another time. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO, I'll give you a leeway.
Through Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, the two motions, the amendment and the motion, would not lead automatically to doing this. There would be a staff report brought back with the changes thought through and what that implication might look like. So this wouldn't be direction just to go ahead to a public hearing. That's what John, are you on the same page?
That's my understanding.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Garden-Cole?
Well, after comments from the warden, I realized that I didn't have a clear understanding of the history of this 100 lot, which John just explained. So no, I don't want to be going backwards, and we can't, 15 years. So in that respect, while I would like to move forward with this in some way, that was not the way to go about it, now knowing what I know right now. So I do want to withdraw my motion, but if there's a process for doing that whereby we have to first vote on the amendment to the motion, so there's no, you're not.
Well, if you withdraw your motion, my amendment's gone.
So we vote on the amendment first?
If Sandra withdraws the motion with the agreement of the seconder, the Claudia's, the amendment disappears.
And that's what I
wish?
to do from the beginning. Yes, I wish to withdraw the motion.
Thank you, Councilor.
Does the seconder agree?
Seconder agree? We have agreement from the mover and the seconder?
Who was the seconder?
Eli. Councilor Rhino?
Just a little bit of back through the history to John. Now, you said what changed, John, was your interpretation of the subdivision, the definition of a subdivision, which we were given advice on that it should be considered an area, correct? Okay, but what I'm trying to get at, when that was created, way back when 100 lots per subdivision as like an Elmwood or things like that, as an example, people voted for that. Now, you're saying interpretation, people may not have voted that same way, is what I'm saying, had they known the proper definition of, or interpretation, not definition, interpretation of subdivision, right? So I guess that's the point I want to try to make.
It's possible, Mr. Chair. I don't remember the discussion 15 or 20 years ago, but it certainly, I know at the time we were definitely thinking of Elmwood, and it was a reaction to
Yeah,
Elmwood.
it was, yeah. It was for Elmwood. So this is what I'm trying to bring up. With that change, people may not have voted in the same fashion. So I don't know where we go from here. We're gonna wait for the fire department to put in, but it's really a conundrum. I don't want to hurt development at all. So, thank you. Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolston?
Yeah. Just to clarify, I don't think our legal opinion was around the definition of subdivision at all. It was around what we thought were particular roads.
I don't remember the exact wording of the clause off the top of my head.
But
Leanne, do
in
you?
any case, we're here where we're at today.
Yeah.
So we're going to hear input, if any, comes forward from the fire service. So in order to try and move this an inch, I am going to move that staff be authorized to review the entire subject that we've been discussing and come back with any suggestions they may have, if any, that they feel would perhaps reflect what was considered to be the original intent of this when first brought into force. Does that do it, John?
Sure.
And I am making that motion for a staff report to look at possible ways of changing our bylaw to more accurately reflect what was believed to be the intent at the time of its inception.
Way back 15 years.
Yes. We may go with it, we may not, but we'll have the,
Question.
no, we've got,
Before the motion, Counselor Dixon?
That's not regarding the motion.
Okay. Motion was before us, the question's being called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously.
no, it isn't. Number one, only 9 people have voted.
Carl's not here.
Well, there's 12 of us to vote, including Council.
Michael left.
So there's still somebody hasn't voted, because we've only got 10 in. Okay, so that is then 9. So- Yeah, okay. Councilor Tingley is against.
Motion is passed with Counselor Tingley voting nay. Thank you, staff, for, okay. Counselor Dixon?
Thank you. Through you to John. You mentioned already the wood roads. Do you have any information like these wood roads if they go through another area?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do. The K-class ones are easy because they're, in a separate PID and so on. The woods roads, I'd want to consult with our GIS people, but most of them are mapped, so we'd be able to find them,
That'd
I
be
think.
something you could do. Maybe we have an alternative exit that might help us. Thank you.
Counselor Musa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to John's comment about making a mistake and approve 200, 300 on a single access. So our obligation now is to find a second access for those 200 some people or 200 families that we put in this situation. If that vulnerability is very high, I think our obligation is not just to take taxes from them, is to find solution to our mistakes.
Any comment?
Do you need a motion for that, or you could add it to the report if you want?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, option 3 of the report actually talked about us going out and looking at creating emergency access points. I guess the intent of that report was to allow further development. We, I guess, hadn't contemplated to go backward to figure out how to add them where development was approved previously. And then I guess we would also have to sort out what development was approved before that regulation came into effect and then after.
Morning
Yeah.
Breeze, 200 lots. That those 200 vulnerable homes, we should find a solution for them. It's not that far. It's ahead of us. We could see it, but we gotta dig somewhere to find it, either provincial or our own money. But those people are paying high taxes, and we put them in that situation. I think we should find it's a safety concern, like the warden saying. We should be looking at finding a solution for those homes that, and even the subdivision on Coxcomb Lake on the other side too. Those are high tax-paying resident, and we should, at least if the safety is an issue here, we should find safety for them too. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. CAO to finish the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to comment on Councillor Moose's position or comments. I think the intent, the report that John will bring back will outline the intent of the subdivision bylaw. And I think from a legal point of view, we would need a legal review of the fact that we've approved subdivisions under the intent of what council of the day put that in place for. We've had consistent application of that throughout the years, and the staff that are here were part of those discussions way back. So I think if we look at the intent of that original subdivision bylaw and the way it was written, we have been following the intent. We've since come up with a sort of red tape issue that has stopped development, but I don't know that there was any intent to stop development around where those subdivisions have come from back in the day. And that report that John will bring will identify that clearly, as much as we can go back in some of our old records. But we've been consistently applying that rule for years. So I wouldn't presume that the municipality has a liability here to those residents who have been part of those subdivisions. We'd have to get a legal interpretation on that. That's my opinion. Yeah.
And even on Grand Lake, there's multi-million dollars homes. They're paying high taxes, and they're vulnerable too. So if we make a mistake, we should fix it. And by fixing it, trust me, we're not losing money, because we're gonna get more tax-paying resident, and it's all gonna pay back at the end. Thank you.
Is that all, Counselor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody left to speak, so that concludes that item. We were scheduled for a break at 2:50. It's now 3:30. Are you looking for a break for 10 minutes? All those in favor of a break? Anybody against? Okay, we'll break until 3:40. we'll go back to this.
Gotta wait for them to. But just remind counselors, when we go to break or anything, we're not immediately off the mic or on break.
Yeah.
Just to keep that in mind.
Welcome back, counselors. We're going to defer item number 16, Highway 214 power pole easement till next month,
No, till council.
till council. Okay. Let's go into council next week. Lot grading and drainage, unserviced areas deferred till next month. Municipal Government Act changes, number 29, deferred to next month. Okay, we're gonna start with, Plan 24-002, Edward Hunter, MPS and LUB amendments. Leanne, oops. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the second report and presentation for an application from Edward Hunter. So the property in question is located on Indian Road and S Road in Upper 9 Mile River. The property is 1.4 hectares in size and it's zoned and designated as agricultural reserve. And this property is not located within growth management or growth reserve area. So the request is to change the designation and zone from the agricultural reserve to the rural use in order to provide further as-of-right opportunities that are not permitted in the AR, specifically residential single-unit dwelling. The property is currently vacant and is cleared. For policy analysis, so staff will refer to our municipal planning strategy policies associated with the rural use designation, as well as general policies related to amending the MPS and land use bylaw. Policy IM10 states council shall only consider private applications to amend the strategy where said amendments are in the best interest of the municipality. And policy AR17 allows council to consider non-agricultural uses by development agreement only, subject to an agricultural impact study. So staff did discuss this option with the applicant, and they chose to proceed with the rezoning redesignation route. So the applicant also provided an agricultural impact study prepared by Hillside Consulting. And that study was required to evaluate the soil classification as well as the impact of the loss of agricultural land. And the property was found to adhere best to the definition of a Class 4 subclass W under the CLI soil classification by the study author. And the study did indicate that the rezoning of the land to rural use would have little impact on the supply and connectivity of agricultural lands within East Hants. So Class 4 soils have severe limitations that restrict the range of crops or require special conservation practices. These soils are low to fair in productivity for a fair range of crops, but may have high productivity for a specially adapted crop. So a full report and analysis of that study would be provided in the final staff report, and PAC and council do have a copy of it as well. The Agricultural Advisory Committee met on November 27th of 2024. However, quorum was not obtained, so the meeting was rescheduled and held January 28th of 2025. And the following motion was brought forward. Move that the Agricultural Advisory Committee recommend to the Planning Advisory Committee recommend to Council to not approve the rezoning and redesignation from agricultural reserve to rural use. The committee suggested the applicant reconsider policy AR17 of the municipal planning strategy that again allows for non-agricultural uses through a development agreement in the AR zone. For citizen engagement, there was an advertisement in the Herald indicating that this application was under review, and we did have a public information meeting on November 5th, 2024, and there was no members of the public that chose to attend, so therefore no comments or concerns were raised. And we did mail out a letter and questionnaire to all property owners within 500 meters. So we sent 22 letters and 4 have been returned so far. The responses didn't have any concerns with the rezoning of the land, however, requested development be limited to residential uses only. So staff will continue to review the proposal to change the land to rural use zone designation, and the proposed amendments, again, will be evaluated using all the applicable policies related to the protection of agricultural land, and council's decision on this application would not be appealable to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board, and a final staff recommendation would come in the final staff report. So the recommendation is that first reading be given to the application. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. Wishing to speak, Warden Rolsford.
Thank you. The balance between preserving agricultural land and development and the rights of people to use their land it's tricky. It's a fine line at best. Similar to what we heard when we introduced zoning in the former unzoned area, it's not always popular. And as I look at applications such as this, which is just over 3 acres in use, this is not a working farm. And yet, here's a piece of land that this gentleman owns that he can't do anything with it but farm. And he's been, to all intents and purposes, I think, a pretty good neighbor. Most folks who have cleared land, they don't want it to grow up in bushes, so they get a local farmer or someone to make the hay or to crop it or to do whatever, to keep it. And yet they're kind of punished for this when the time comes that they want to do something different with it. And I believe that it's time that we review our agricultural reserve regulations. I was here when they were brought in. We were going to do a review at some point in time, at that time, that never really got done over what properties were captured. And I think the problem is that, similar to what almost happened in the rural area, I think at the time cleared land was just assumed to be agricultural land. And to me, there is a difference between active agricultural land owned and farmed by an agricultural entity and a 2 or 3 acre parcel that someone has inherited or bought or whatever, that he allows his neighboring farmer to mow the hay off of or pasture his horse on or whatever. To me, that doesn't make it agricultural land. And I know it's a tough thing, the balance between the rights of landowners and the need to protect, our food sources and everything else. But I just wanted to make that comment. When I see ones like this and the hoops that people have to jump through to try and do something on a piece of land that's just over 3 acres, and I'm taken back to a property in East Gore that had inadvertently been captured in the agricultural zone that was like less than an acre a while back. Didn't even realize it was agricultural till the poor fellow wanted to build a piece onto his house. And so I don't know. I'm just going to say I'm probably at some point in time going to make a motion that we review our regulation around agricultural reserve land. And I don't know just what that motion's going to look like. It may look at PIDs under a certain acreage or something. I don't know. But I think we are unnecessarily restricting people in what they can do with their land without actually benefiting the preservation of agricultural land and our farming community. So I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councilor Merriam.
Yes, thanks, Chair. And I wanted to thank staff for a clear report, and I thought it laid it out well. And I'd like to proceed with reading the motion and making the motion. So I recommend the Planning Advisory Committee recommends that Council give first reading and consider a proposal for PID 451-89206 to change from the agricultural reserve AR zone and designation to the rural use RU zone and designation and for the purpose of enabling a public hearing and authorize staff to schedule a public hearing. Thank you.
It's moved in second. For the motion, Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, did the Agricultural Advisory Committee give any specific reasons why they didn't want this changed? Or did you just following the guidelines set down by the government?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was some discussion on the agricultural impact study and the soil classifications, as well as rezoning one may lead to rezoning others and setting a precedent that if we approve one, then it leads to approving others. The motion wasn't unanimous, so there were some members of the committee that wanted people to be able to develop like a single unit dwelling on their property. So there was some back and forth discussion, but it wasn't.
And in further times like this, I think that information would be prudent for this council to hear, just basically what the facts were of that. Yep. From my point of view is that, it's 3 acres, class 4 soil, and to make any kind of a viable product off of that, it's gonna cost you a lot of money. You're gonna have to you're gonna have to plow it, hair it, fertilize it, whatever you're gonna do. For that small piece of land, it's not feasible for any big farm to do. Maybe somebody's doing little home farming, but there's no buildings there on the property anyway, so, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Warden McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I was just wondering, when we discussed this at the Agricultural Committee, part of the reason was that he could still build a house, do everything that he wants with a development agreement, correct? That he's able to do that? Yep.
Through a development agreement.
Yeah, so now, my question I was wondering about when I was reading this the other night, so he goes in and gets a development agreement, it isn't changed from agricultural, he gets a development agreement, he builds a house. 10 years down the road, he wants to build a double bay garage, does he have to get another development agreement with that, or how does that work? How restricted
through you,
is he?
Mr. Chair, it would likely be something written into the development agreement that accessory uses to the single unit dwelling would be permitted. Like that's stuff you could write into the development agreement so that he wouldn't need another one down the
And
line.
I think that was the feeling of the agricultural committee, that the majority of them, that would be just as well to leave the agricultural reserve as it is, because he could do everything that he wanted by just coming in with a development agreement. And so he could basically do
Through a
that.
development agreement, if for a single unit dwelling, if that was what
Yeah,
they were intending to do, yeah.
good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tierney wants to weigh in. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favor of the motion, actually. I'm also in favor of trying to preserve as much agriculture land as possible, but I think the warden outlined what the situation is here, and they've had a good report done by this Hillside Consultants. It's not going to impact the supply of agriculture land in East Hants. I think every decision we make is situational. So this one here, I'm going to be supporting. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Warden Rolston.
Yes, thank you. Just a question that this situation brings to mind, because you could do a dwelling on agricultural land that's not related to agricultural use by development agreement, correct?
Correct, yep.
Could you do an accessory dwelling on agricultural land by development agreement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you could do one now if it's related to a farm, if you have a
No.
single unit dwelling.
If you have farm acreage of 100 acres, however many acres it is, and you have one existing dwelling on it, and the owner would like to put an accessory dwelling unit for a family member on that agricultural reserve ground, is that permitted through development agreement?
I don't know.
It might be permitted as a right.
No, it's
As of
not.
right,
We've
it's only-
discussed this one, but it is.
If it's,
But the thing gets in there, this definition of a bona fide farm gets in the way for it happening that way. When we're looking at a property that's perhaps not, it's not an income generating farm, but it's land that's been kept agriculturally viable for many years. Anyway, that, I'm not gonna get into that discussion here, but just put staff on notice, I'm gonna be looking for an answer to that, and I know John knows what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Counselor Rhino?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I sat on the committee and I respected the decision they made with regard to recommendation to planning advisor. However, does this, when you allow a dwelling like this through development agreement, does this take into account well, septic, and things like that nature?
through you, Mr. Chair, they would still have to get approval
Yeah,
for their
okay.
well and septic, of
Yeah.
course, yeah.
So that parcel would be cut off, that piece of agricultural land, correct?
The whole parcel is agricultural land.
Yeah, but what
so-
I'm getting at, it takes, for wetlands and septic, it's on average 2 acres of land, almost 2 acres of land to have the well and septic. So that would be non-agricultural right there. So that only leaves 1.46 acres. What are you gonna do on 1.46 acres of land, agriculture-wise? It's gonna be very limited, very small, very thing. So really, if it was a bigger piece of property, I might tend to agree that they should go to development route, but I don't think for 1.46 acres left over, you may as well just change it all and be done with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Nobody else left to speak. We'll go to the vote. Ten in favor, one against, and Deputy Warden McPhee voting nay. Thank you, Leanne, for that. Next item on the agenda is Plan 24-013 Central Tire Development Agreement Application. Leanne, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an application received from Philip Higgs on behalf of Dennis Penner and Clinton Penner of Central Tire Services Limited. So the property is located at 5209 Highway 215 in East Knoll. The zoning, it's a rural use north zone, and the property is 2.6 hectares in size, and it's not within our growth management or growth reserve area. So the applicant is requesting to enter into a development agreement with the municipality to allow for a 200 by 100 square foot warehouse on their property in East Knoll. So that use falls within our transportation and warehousing use, which is a use permitted as of right within our highway commercial zone. And the RU2 zone permits highway commercial zone uses by development agreement only, so that use is not permitted as of right in the rural use north zone, so that's why it has to go through the development agreement process. And the intention is for the building to be used for the storage of materials associated with their business on the property. So this is a concept plan. It's a little bit difficult to see, but this is the outline of their property, and the building is located to the rear of the property, and they also own this piece as well. So the Planning Development Department will review the proposed application based on the applicable policies contained within the municipal planning strategy. It's policy AR 39A of the municipal planning strategy that enables any highway commercial zone use in the rural use zone by entering into a development agreement. And council shall also consider policies IM 27 through 29 when considering development agreement applications. And a detailed table of all of those evaluative criteria will be provided in the final staff report. Planning staff will comply as well with the citizen engagement policies. So there will be an advertisement placed in the Chronicle Herald just indicating that this is under review. And we will send a letter and questionnaire to all property owners within 300 meters asking for comments on the application. So in terms of timelines, we're just at the initial consideration stage, so the beginning of the process here. And the recommendation is for initial consideration to be given to the development agreement and to authorize staff to schedule a public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. Councilor Rhino?
And it's new for the people, and it's gonna be a learning curve for them. How long would a process like this normally take if everything is favorable right straight through? Would this allow them to start in this construction season as early as possible? Could you give me a timeline?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe we typically say 4 to 6 months. It depends on how long comments come back in, as well as when it's approved, it has to go through an appeal period as well. So that adds 2 weeks, and then it has to get registered. So typically around 4-ish months, give or
4-ish
take.
months,
So.
yeah. Well, what I heard initially was 9, and that just blew me away there, because that's really prohibitive in people doing business along that shore. So if you're saying 4 months to 6 months?
4 to 6, I would say.
4 to
is
6 months,
usually-
so the process would probably get over, this is February, July, August?
I'd say so, hopefully.
And that would be the quickest we could get this done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is what the people in the new zone are not aware of, and it's up to us to explain it to them. This will be the process. So it's gonna be a rough little go, but we'll try to get the word out there. Thank you. Oh, I better read it. If I can find it.
It's on the screen, so, yeah.
Well, Planning Advisory Committee recommends to council, the council give initial consideration to enter into a development agreement for a transportation and warehousing building located on the property identified as PID 451-48996, Highway 215, East Knoll, for the purpose of enabling a public hearing and authorizing staff to schedule a public hearing. I so move.
Been moved in second. On before the motion. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Following up on the timelines here, 6 months is a very long time for what's a pretty simple request. This is an existing business, a service station. They have they sell trailers and they sell tires. They're a tire distributor, and it just, 6 months to me seems, is there some way to expedite that? I know at times we've done first reading and, I don't know, but I'm sure these folks won't be happy with 6 months, and I'm pretty sure their customers won't either. So I don't know. I know things take time, but my goodness. I guess I hadn't realized that if anyone in this municipality came in and wanted a development agreement, it traditionally takes 6 months before we can get there. Is that our timeline now?
Sure.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. that's sort of the standard timeline we give everybody. This one, you're right, it does look simpler to me. There are no municipal services to have comments on or, those other more complicated things. Provided comments come back within a reasonable period of time from provincial public works and internally, I think 6 would be unusual for something like this. I think it's probably more in that 4 range.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to staff, what if this had been called a garage instead of a warehouse? Would that have made a difference?
Well, it depends, through you, Mr. Chair, it depends on what it would have been used for, how we would have defined it. If
A
it's just
storage building.
for a business at this size, and we would have called it a warehouse regardless.
I'm going to be thinking some more about this because in the RU2 zone, I just, not everyone's going to, every application might not be a rubber stamp, but I just think we're unnecessarily slowing some things that just make good common sense down. That's my thought process. Thank you. And I'll just suggest anything we can to move this quickly, I'm sure would be appreciated.
Thank you, Warden. Nobody left to speak, so we'll go to the vote. Four, and the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Leanne. Next item on the agenda is PLN 24-015 Clayton Development Limited Development Agreement Application. Rachel, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just bring the presentation up on the screen. So the application is from Clayton Developments Limited, and it relates to their Kiln Creek developments in Lance. The proposal is to amend an existing development agreement, which was approved in 2020. The existing development agreement permits a mixed-use, walkable, comprehensive development district, and it permits 1,500 dwelling units, commercial development, parkland, and active transportation trails. So some of the developments has occurred, so you can see where my cursor is. These lots have already been subdivided out from the main piece of land. Some parkland has been dedicated to the municipality, and there's some commercial lots alongside the Lance connector here that's also been taken out of the original property. Here's just an aerial photograph. In this building here, you can see this is an apartment building, and then we have the garden homes just here, which have been constructed. But this isn't up to date in terms of the other buildings that have been constructed, but there have been a number of single units and townhouses which have been constructed. So the development proposal, there's 4 elements to it, and I'll go into each one in more detail, but there's permits a self-storage use on Block K, permits a proposed site redesign to enable more multi-unit residential units, and this would require an increase in the unit cap within the development agreement by 275. Enhance opportunities for townhouses, in particular manufactured 16-foot wide townhouses, and permits sub-phasing at the subdivision stage. So the self-storage units, the development agreement does not allow for self-storage use in any of the commercial areas. But the development agreement does allow for amendments to the commercial uses, so changing any of the commercial uses or adding any into that list of permitted uses can be considered a substantial amendment. The applicant is requesting that self-storage building be permitted, and what they're looking at is a 2 to 4 story building. So this is an example of one that's been built on Bayers Lake, and this is kind of the building that they're looking at. So it's confined in one building with multiple stories rather than the single level buildings that you see a lot with self-storage.
So the applicant is also requesting that additional multi-unit residential buildings be permitted and that the development agreement enable 275 more residential units, which will increase the maximum number of units to 1,775 for the whole development. So in the development agreement, that does actually allow for an unsubstantial change to allow for apartment buildings in this location, but the actual increase in the number of units to allow that to occur is not identified as an unsubstantial amendment. So to enable this to happen, some of the commercial land needs to be removed from the original concept plan, and some of the lower density housing. Multi-unit residential area is proposed to be accessed off a driveway, which you can see here with my cursor, which is linking these two roads, Weagle Street with Allen Shore Boulevard. Staff have some concerns with the use of a driveway instead of a municipal street, and we'll discuss this with the applicant. So this is the new plan, new concept plan, and I'll skip to the proposed plan so you can see the difference. So this is where that apartment buildings will be proposed to be located. And just to kind of give you an idea of the change, if you can see my cursor, this area here approximately of commercial land will be changed to multi-unit residential. We have this wetland here, which is proposed to be altered. They do have approval from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change to alter this wetland. And there'll be some loss of some of these lower density dwellings here to accommodate the multi-unit residential. So the application also requests a reduction in the minimum lot frontage for on-street and stacked townhouses from 5.5 meters to 4.8 meters. The applicant has indicated that this will enable them to maintain the diversity of price points for first-time home buyers. And they're saying that this will allow them to develop manufactured townhouses, which have a 16-foot wide form. So staff are also aware that there are issues in some areas regarding parking, and staff will be looking at this issue when reviewing this in particular, this element of the proposed amendments. More townhouse units are included on the concept plan, but these are not increasing unit numbers as they replace other unit types. And the applicant is requesting that subphasing of subdivision applications be enabled. So this would mean that a phase can be broken into smaller parts. So for example, phase 3 could be phase 3A and phase 3B. Currently the development agreement says that at tentative subdivision stage, a whole phase has to come forward. So that's another requested change that they're asking for. So the application will be reviewed based on the policies contained in the municipal planning strategy, and a detailed table of the criteria and policies with corresponding comments from staff and reviewing agencies will be attached to the final report. Comments will be requested from external and internal agencies, which will include municipal departments of economic and business development, parks, rec and culture, and infrastructure and operations. An amended traffic impact study has been submitted with the application, and this will be sent to Nova Scotia Public Works and the Municipal Departments of Infrastructure and Operations for comments. And the applicant has received wetland alteration permit from Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change. So planning staff will comply with the citizen engagement policies of the municipal planning strategy. A letter and questionnaire will be mailed to all properties within 300 meters. And this will include new residents of Kiln Creek. We're right here at the initial consideration stage, and you can see there are a number of steps that need to be undertaken before the application comes back with a final report and a public hearing. So the recommendation is that initial consideration be given to the development agreement amendments and authorize staff to schedule a public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. First up to speak, Councillor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a lot to take in. They're looking for a big multi-level self-storage unit in the new development agreement, increase units by 275, reduce the townhouses from 18 to 16 feet, increase to the medium density development area, and permit subphasing. So, I mean, it's a lot to take in. When you start breaking it down, I'm kind of surprised that staff is recommending it even at this time, because that great big self-storage unit, in my mind, is totally not appropriate in that, in that residential development. Not to mention the fact that we refused Burke's application for self-storage down in Elmsdale because we didn't think that it was an applicable place for it, and staff recommended that that kind of self-storage needs to be directed to the industrial park. And it was more of a suitable place than in the middle of this residential. I've seen that exact unit on Roby Street, and it would be very out of place. Secondly, the 16-foot townhouses is obviously going to be an issue. When I see those, when I think of 16 feet from me over to the deputy warden, and the parking, like it's just, and I don't know what there would be for a yard. 18 feet seems to be pushing it. 16 feet is just trying to cram more units in to a smaller spot. And if we allowed 16 feet the next time, they'd be looking for 14 feet. So I would not be in favor at all. With the parking issues that we're having with these kinds of developments, just to give you an FYI, Maple Ridge School had an issue and had to call the RCMP a couple of weeks ago because they couldn't get 2 school buses in to the entrance to Maple Ridge because the driveway to Maple Ridge was lined with vehicles after a snowfall. Turns out, once they called the RCMP, these were vehicles from from Shaw's neighbor Clayton Development who weren't able to park on the street because it was a snowfall, and so they were forced to go over, or they thought, well, they go over and park in the school. They can't fit into their parking spots because there's not enough parking spots. So these are the kinds of situations that we have created, and I certainly do not want to be creating anymore. And that's my thoughts for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. I would echo everything that Councillor Garden Cole has just said. And I would also add that if you go back to the map, I understand that they've received permission to alter the wetland. But aside from that, that circled place there wasn't just a wetland. I would assume it would have been open space that we're losing as well.
No, that wasn't open space, it was just wetland.
Okay. I just, and they were obviously subdividing somehow because there's no block K on this one. That's something new. I guess in short, I don't see anything in this proposition that is better than what they have in their development agreement currently. I don't see any improvements. And I just, I would think that a master planned community would be better at providing for the needs of the people who are going to live there, which in this area is going to include adequate parking, which in some cases will be a struggle as it is. And I do not support this. I do not even support it going forward for a public hearing. I just can't imagine. Anyway, I don't know what what opportunities we have. If we do not move to give initial consideration and go to public hearing, what happens then? Is that appealable?
It would be appealable.
But they have an existing development agreement, and we're happy with that. So if we say stick to what you agreed to?
They could appeal this application. This is a request to amend that development agreement, and that's appealable, the same as the original agreement would have been appealable.
Well, I don't believe that there is anything in this this request that addresses our desire for a good mix of commercial and residential, which is very plain in all our documents that we're looking for. I don't believe it builds a strong community in that there will be a lack of parking. I'll just use those for a couple of things that I don't think this proposed amendment meets our policies and our goals. And I'm not going to be supporting doing anything further with this one. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just respond to
Go
a couple
ahead.
of the comments that have been made? Just a point of clarification with regards to the existing development agreements. So where the self-storage building is proposed is in this block K here. And story buildings are actually permitted in all of this area here, the red color, which is commercial development. So they could, so the only difference really is to allow for a self-storage unit. So the developer could come in and build a 6-story commercial building based on all of the list of commercial uses that are permitted in the development agreements, but they're asking for the self-storage to be permitted as a change to that development agreement. So just wanted to highlight that the parking, currently there's a requirement to have 2 spaces. When the development agreement was being drafted, there was recognition that there were parking issues in some areas of the municipality. So at that point in time, the parking requirements was increased from what's in the land use bylaw, because right now, if you have 6 units and under, you are only required as of right to have 1 parking space per unit. Well, this development agreement requires them to have 2 parking spaces. So there is some things in there that deal with parking that isn't necessarily applicable to other areas of the municipality, where review the application and take a look and see. Because right now, based on the frontage that they have, I did a quick calculation earlier, they're required. So where you have townhouses, each 2 units have a share, like a driveway that's paired, so that between those you get an area out front of the property where you could park on the street. When I did a calculation earlier, it looks like you could accommodate a smaller vehicle on street between those paired driveways, but reducing the frontage of the building would reduce the ability to do that. But that's just one of the things that staff will look at and report back to Planning Advisory Committee in the future. But they are required to have 2 parking spaces, and there is standards in the development agreements about the size of the parking spaces that they are required to provide on the property.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, and this perhaps I'm interpreting it incorrectly, but I do not consider on-street parking in any way to be meeting required parking for a dwelling.
It doesn't. That's in addition to the 2 parking spaces.
I won't be supporting this going any further, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. I'm going to go to John. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things Rachel just mentioned. And I get, as Councillor earlier mentioned, there are a lot of items here, some fairly significant changes. So if the committee isn't comfortable approving a public hearing at this point, I guess my request would be that you allow staff to continue to negotiate with the developer to make some improvements to the site plan, and I guess do the normal consultation that we would before we go any further. On the 16-foot, I would mention that the rationale for that is not just to cram things in. It's really because modular housing, to fit on a truck can only be so wide. That's why they're being done that way. In terms of the comment was also made that it's inappropriate because this is a residential area. Well, the DA always imagined this as a mixed-use area, so I don't know that self-storage in and of itself would be inappropriate. Again, that's a lot of details here to work through, but I don't think off the bat it's inappropriate. Typically, the concerns we have with self-storage facilities is that they look very industrial, they're kind of land consumptive and so on. So if you're able to put it in a multi-story structure, then that, I think, improves some of those issues. And the one that Rachel demonstrated in Bears Lake, I think actually is a decent looking building. And definitely parking. We talked about the parking and the driveway that is proposed to be a driveway instead of a public street. So staff already identified some things in their plan that we want to talk further with the developer about. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Deputy Warden McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, it was interesting to hear Councillor Garden Cole say why the cars were parked there, because I went up by one day and saw all those cars. So maybe the developer should consider a parking garage rather than a storage unit, might be more helpful. But I know they've gotten a permit or permitted from Nova Scotia Environment to alter the wetlands, but I'd just like to clarify that that's actually destroy the wetland, I assume.
Yes, I haven't been through the permit to see exactly what it says, but they have permission to remove this wetland. What that looks in terms of compensation elsewhere, I don't have that information up front, but they will be able to go in and infill this wetland and whatever environment requires them to do. Usually it's like compensation to somewhere else.
I'd like to know what the compensation is before. So right now, I won't be supporting moving ahead with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Dixon.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, I guess, I'm the same with, councilors already mentioned the overall problem. The width of the road in front of the building, the drive roadway, how wide is that?
Do you mean the width of
The streets,
Proposed driveway?
no, streets.
So this, this is a driveway. I don't have the information on the width of that right
Okay.
now.
That'd be something to be interesting, because parking is gonna be a major concern. I was up in, one in Infield yesterday, we had a fire call there. There's no way a large fire truck would get through, because they park on the road, snowplows had to go through. There's something like to be addressed. As well as, the question here going out to 300 meters. I don't think that's wide enough for this, because it's gonna stay within their own boundaries. I think 500 or 1,000, so you'd actually get some residential input would be a suggestion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was thinking about that earlier today, actually. I think my suggestion would be that we go to the extent of the, and council, PAC and council can go further than that, but based on the 300, it would include these properties, but it would make sense to go further than that. So it would actually come to the edge of what was the original development agreement, which comes down to Highway 2. And I would see that you would go 300 meters in that location, but of course, PAC can direct us to go further than that if they feel that that's appropriate.
Well, to that. And the only other comment, I think John's comment there about meeting with them again and bringing it back would probably be a good suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John or Rachel, like when they remove that wetland, is that going to affect their drainage plan that they already submitted?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Is they going to
The,
affect?
the drainage plan, whatever, like the
That's-
stormwater.
So the wetlands were part of each subdivision phase has to come forward with a stormwater management plan. So
Yeah.
that will have to factor into their plans. The wetlands in there, they will form part of a function of a stormwater system. But until we get to that area of the development and that phase of the development, it's hard to say, but it will. I'm not an engineer, so it's hard to say. I don't know if Jesse's gone. But I suspect that will need to be taken of account. Yeah.
So for them now, they do a stormwater plan, a management plan for each section they do, or for the whole project, then?
They did have, with the original agreement, they did have I can't remember what it was. Conceptual stormwater management plan. But every phase of subdivision, they're required to have a detailed stormwater management plan. So when you get phase 3, it will include many houses and they will have to plan for that particular area. But the conceptual plan looked at the area as a whole. I'd have to look and see whether we have the information from the developer amending that conceptual plan. I can't recall if we had that.
That's what I would like to know about. And the multi-units, like they're proposing like 6 stories or just townhouses?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the development agreement allows them to build up to 6 stories on any of their multi-unit buildings. So based on the current agreement, unless that's changed, they would be 6-story. But actually, although they've been permitted 6-story, the one that I identified down closer to, I'm trying to find it on a plan. This one down here, I believe that's 4 stories. So although they have permission for 6 stories, it doesn't always work out that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Tingley, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I have some of the same concerns as everybody else has there, especially with the wetland. It always seems odd to me that the province can come in and, like Deputy Warden McPhee said, destroy the wetlands, and there's no consultation with now going through this process of trying to tell us how to create a stormwater management plan, and it's just being done piecemeal in these subdivisions, and supposedly not having no effect on the nearby lands. And on the other side of the highway, we know how much wetland was there, and I've lived in this particular area most of my life, and I know how much wetland was on this side of the highway as well, and it's pretty well all gone. So I'm a little concerned with how that affects stormwater, but that's been done, I guess. Overall, I don't have some of the other concerns that some other councillors have with respect to this project, and notwithstanding my concerns, I would be prepared to see it go to a public hearing and find out some more information and hear a little more about this diversity of price point and how that might affect the affordability in our area. So I'm prepared to let this go to a public hearing, and I'll make the motion as written. That's it.
Seconder for the motion?
Should be read into the record.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Tingley. Counselor Merriman.
Thank you, Chair. Question about permitting subphasing at subdivision. Just a couple of questions related to that. It sounds from the report like there's some new flexibility on subphasing. Can you comment on that, please?
They're requesting that flexibility. Right now, the development agreement says that they have to bring each phase forward in its entirety. The development officer can approve final subdivision phase parts of that at different times. So what that means is when a tentative plan of subdivision comes in, the developer shows how the land is going to be subdivided, where the roads are going to be, the standards and all the kind of stuff that goes into planning for a subdivision. Then when that receives approval, the developer goes in and builds the roads. And once they have all of that construction done, they apply for final subdivision approval, which says that the roads have been constructed. It's all been done in accordance with that subdivision plan. What they're asking for, what the development agreement currently allows them to do, is submit the whole phase, so phase 3, for example, and then they don't have to build all of the roads all at once. They can come in whenever they're ready for each final phase. So if they want to build part of that phase 1 year and part the next year, they can do that and just apply for the final when that road's done. But what they're asking for is to piecemeal it in the tentative subdivision stage. So you have phase 3, they want to be able to apply for tentative for just a smaller portion of that phase rather than wait until final.
Is it possible that if the wish is granted on subphasing, that as things are progressing, that they could change their mind and try to submit new criteria or would the game plan be in place for this is how the development is going to look? But as an example, today we're seeing some proposed changes. I'm just wondering with subphasing, can requests be periodically submitted back to us for further changes as part of subphasing?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that's all processed by the development officer, the phasing of subdivision. So I think what you're asking, through you, Mr. Chair, is if council approves that sub-phasing element, that's not going to have an impact on, I can't in my mind think about how that would impact the whole developments other than it will parcel out the different phases.
So if I understand correctly, the plan would be kind of set up front, but the sub-phasing would be just introducing pieces periodically?
Correct, yeah.
So would there be any risks to the municipality and extra costs involved? I'm just thinking of what are the negatives to us? It sounds like if we had our druthers, we would rather not have sub-phasing, hence that was the original state of affairs. So can you just comment a little bit on what the downside is of sub-phasing,
Yeah,
please?
I can do that through you, Mr. Chair. So with coming in with a whole phase, it allows, so the development officer will consult with our engineers, the Parks and Rec departments. The development agreement is tied to the Parks contributions, is tied to phases. So when you start parceling it up, it can complicate things there. And then there's extra staff time to review each smaller phase rather than reviewing it as one bigger phase. So there are definitely implications to making that change, and staff can do that review and provide that information to Planning Advisory Committee in the final staff report as to what those changes have in terms of staff resources and how those phases are reviewed when it comes to subdivision.
And I might squeeze in an extra question as well through chair to staff. In terms of if it were agreed upon that there would be a going back to the developer, how long does that process usually take in terms of perhaps some rethinking of this and then coming back to us? Is it weeks? A month? How long generally does that take?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I think what John was suggesting is that rather than give approval for us to go and schedule a public hearing at this stage, we would come back with another report once those discussions and those details have been fleshed out a bit more with the developer, and maybe we've consulted with Public Works, our internal departments, and we have a lot more, the review is mostly complete. And then we bring that report to Planning Advisory Committee, and then maybe councillors or Planning Advisory Committee are more comfortable in moving forward with scheduling a public hearing. So all that said, I think the additional element is one extra report, so it might add an extra month to the process.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rhino?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear the concerns that's going around here about it, and I tend to agree with a lot of them here. But what's got me intrigued is a self-storage unit. And if I read it, the development agreement does not allow for a self-storage use in any of the commercial areas. Is that written into the development agreement, or is that left out so it's
left out. The development agreement there's 3 different types of commercial areas, and in all of them, it doesn't say that self-storage is permitted. It lists all of the things that are permitted. Anything that's not listed is not permitted.
It's not permitted. So if it's not permitted, then it's section 6.3F of the development agreement enables amendments to the list of commercial uses be considered as an unsubstantial amendment. To me, that just lets it in for them to get what's not allowed down the road. And if we defeated this on that basis, how could that be appealable? Because if it's not, self-storage units are not permitted in the commercial, so how could that be appealable if we held our guns on that one?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the unsubstantial changes to the development agreement, as PAC is aware, it's a simpler process. It just comes forward with one report, and council then gets to decide if they want to approve that unsubstantial change. So this is specifically called out in the development agreement for any changes or any additions to the commercial uses can be dealt with in that way. And that is appealable, that as well as substantial changes and unsubstantial changes, they're both appealable to the Utility and Review Board. It's a decision of council, the same as a substantial change.
Well, I guess this is the way this is written. Maybe if that was written in some different things that the development agreement does not allow, or a development agreement has not been permitted for self-storage in this development agreement, and then it reads down, because it's really conflicting right there now. But I tend to agree with the rest of them. I don't think this is a good fit. These changes are too much, and maybe we should go back and renegotiate. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hebb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. Very first initial stage of this, and I believe staff has heard the comments of this council and what they like and what they don't like, and I think going back to the developer and present these issues with them and see if they want to make any changes or not, and come back with another report for later. So at this point, I'm willing to move this forward and support this at least for now. We can turn it down later, but I would like to see the report come back and see if they can see what the developer says anyway. So, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion that's on the floor now moves us forward to allow staff to schedule a public hearing on everything that is in this request. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I've heard a lot of concerns around here that there's not support for everything that's in here. And I would rather that staff go back to the developer before we go to public hearing and say, look, you know, at initial blush, it seems that council has quite a few concerns, and see, you know, if they might want to change anything before we get to the public hearing stage. As Councillor Garden Cole said, this is a lot packed into one request. This is not one substantial amendment. It's a lot of substantial amendments. So I'm not sure where we go. I'm not going to support going to public hearing at this time, but I'm a little bit afraid that if we vote this motion down, that it just kills the whole thing. And I would be willing to listen if staff had further discussions with the developer. So I'm not sure where we go. So I guess I'm looking to the director to see, is there a way out of this conundrum? I suppose we could table the motion and then make a motion for staff to have further discussion with the developer before we move forward to it.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, exactly. You could just table the motion.
Well, at this point in time, I'm going to move to table.
So, thank you, Warden. Shoot.
Somebody hasn't.
We have 10.
Holder has not voted on this one. We'll lost it.
4, 10.
Okay, so we'll have to assume that he's left the room for this discussion,
Okay.
so.
And the motion to table is passed unanimously.
And if I could then,
Just a minute. Did you say you might come on?
When we don't have these mics on, you can't hear.
Warden Rolston?
I would move that staff go back to the developer and have further discussions around this request based on discussion at committee today.
Thank you, Warden. Counselor Rhino to the motion?
No, it's around procedure after the vote, please.
Okay. Nobody left to speak, we'll vote on the motion. Okay. And the motion is passed unanimously. Counselor Rhino, you have something?
Just a kind of a thing here. I've noticed that some councillors, it's not been, we've been slowly changing, but I personally would rather have something read into the minutes than I recommend what's on the screen, or I recommend whatever motion. So that would be my preference, that it be read in and not just read that. And the second question is, when motions are done like that, do the public who are on outside on the internet, or do they see these motions? Do they do? But I still feel that they should be read into for public record and not just say how I move the recommended motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Counselor. CAO, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I nod in my head, yes, they do see them. Sometimes if the motion is on the bottom part of the screen, then they can, the camera is also on the bottom of the screen, so some of the motion is cut off. So we can probably try and get our motions to the top part of the screen, then they would be more visible for the public.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Last item on the agenda is mini homes as accessory dwelling units. Leanne, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this presentation is coming back regarding mini homes as accessory dwelling units. So in June of 2024, Council passed a motion directing staff to review land use regulations that are preventing small manufactured housing units from being used as accessory dwelling units. So currently in our land use bylaw, mini homes are not permitted to be used as an accessory dwelling unit within a residential zone as per section 6.2.5. And mini home dwellings are not permitted as a main use within any of our residential zones. So 6.2.5 references the width to length ratio for residential buildings, and the clause here specifically says mini home dwellings, as per the definition, are not permitted. So should PAC and council wish to consider small mini homes as accessory dwelling units, an amendment to remove that section, which states mini home dwellings are not permitted, would be required, so removing the text in red. And as per the permitted uses table within our land use bylaw, mini homes would still not be permitted as a main use within a residential zone. There's also some design requirements in the land use bylaw that would prevent a mini home from being used as an accessory dwelling unit, and that regulation states that the accessory dwelling unit must match the main dwelling and building material type, cladding color, roof type, and pitch. Shipping containers were exempt from this regulation, so an amendment to also exempt mini homes from this design requirement would be required, as well as exempting them from the height requirement as well. There's no other proposed changes in terms of maximum size setbacks being proposed at this time. And just to note as well, at last month's PAC and council, it was authorized, or council authorized staff to come back with a report regarding those design requirements. So just in the interest of not delaying this specific application, that's not being dealt with at this time. It will be done in a future meeting. There are also municipal planning strategy policy amendments that would need to be, that would be required as well. So policies RD2, RD16, and RD21 specifically reference that an accessory dwelling unit shall be designed to maintain the appearance of a single detached dwelling. So an amendment to remove that requirement would also be required. And again, so these are just some of the styles of mini homes that would be permitted that meet the regulations in terms of the length to width ratio and the maximum allowable square footage for an accessory dwelling unit, which again is either 80% of the gross floor area of the main dwelling up to 80 square meters, which is 861 square feet. And this is just another example. Citizen engagement, so there was an advertisement indicating that these amendments were under review. That was in the Chronicle Herald. And we did have a public information meeting on February 4th. And some of the comments from that meeting included some timelines regarding these amendments and when they could become effective, whether these amendments apply across the municipality or are specific to a certain area, and then the definition of mini home versus stick-built dwelling. So the recommendation today is for first reading be given and authorize staff to schedule a public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. Councilor Ryman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you to staff, just to be sure. So what you're saying is this mini home as an accessory dwelling does not have to match the primary residence, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's what the amendments, they would be exempt from those design requirements.
And a stick-built home will be coming later in a report.
Yep,
All
correct.
right, because I think that, not rushing you, but I think they all should match very quickly, so we're all on the same plane
Yep,
with regard to
that
that.
will be coming, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that will take effect on all residential lots, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, these amendments would apply to the residential zone, so your R1, R2, country residential, lakeshore residential, provided they can still meet all the other underlying requirements for an accessory dwelling unit.
And the access, like, I know in Mount Uniac on a lakeshore, all accessory dwelling are in the front of the lot. Like, they're building a garage, they're building something on the top of it. They're not gonna be allowed to put that in the front of the home, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, these would be required to be in the rear yard, like a garden suite. Only garage suites are permitted in the front yard.
And I don't know how you're gonna be able to back those ones and put them in a backyard on a 10,000 square foot lot or 15,000 square foot lot. And I don't feel comfortable about allowing them in an area where you're not allowed to put them in a home as a primary dwelling. So we're contradicting ourselves here, like we're allowing it as secondary dwelling, but not as a. I can see it in rural use, RU zone, R2 zone, RU2 zone, but not on a lake shore or. It's not going to be very popular in my area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Merriman.
Thank you, Chair. Like a number of other councilors, I was at the public information meeting recently, which was well attended. And the report lays this information out quite nicely, so I'm going to go ahead and move the motion. The Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council give first reading to amend the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to permit small mini homes as accessory dwelling units for the purpose of enabling a public hearing and authorize staff to schedule a public hearing.
Moved in second, thank you. Councilor Garden-Cole, you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes. I just need clarification on where mini homes aren't permitted as a primary residence.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in our residential zone, so your R1, R2, country residential, and lakeshore residential, they're not permitted as a main use.
So they're not permitted as a main use, but they're going to be permitted as a secondary use.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Nobody left to speak, so we'll go to the vote. Walter with us, he's for. And the motion is passed with 10-1 with Counselor Musa voting nay. Thank you, staff. That concludes Planning Advisory Committee for today. I want to thank Public Member Balcom for staying with us. And motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor? Contrary minded? We are adjourned. Yeah, I'm adjourned. And we'll go to Park, Rec, and Culture with Councilor Rhino as chairperson.
Wow. Is that what you're gonna say every time now?
Madam CAO, any complaints, go to Counselor Hebb over there. He's your counselor. I was just telling the CAO, you're her counselor. We better stop, we're still on ball.
I'd like to call this meeting of Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee to order. First order of business would be skating pond, Bell Ann Avenue and Garden Road, Atlanta Tapper and Evan McDougal. Would you be taking this?
It's just Atlanta Tapper today.
Just Atlanta today?
Just
All
Atlanta.
right, that's good.
Dropping like flies. Okay. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So this report really is based on a motion connected to a previous motion. So in October 2020, staff were given direction to secure 2 PIDs on Belknap Avenue from the province. In the first sentence of the summary, the 2 PIDs are listed. So a second piece was then given to staff through motion C-2290, and that was to investigate and look into a third property, and it's PID 45396-785, and it's at the corner of Belknap Avenue and Garden Road, and I can show a map further down in the presentation. And it was to look into possibly acquiring this parcel. It was maintained as a recreation space similar to the other 2 parcels by a not-for-profit, the Elmsdale and District Rec Association, which is now defunct. It's no longer registered and hasn't been for many years under Registry of Joint Stocks. And once it was no longer registered and the group was defunct, then those parcels were vested to the province. So we've since acquired the first 2 PIDs. They are now joined into one, consolidated. And then this discussion really is about looking into acquiring that third PID. It does have a pond on it that has been used historically by the community for skating in the winter. And this report really delves into the operations, risk, and liability considerations before we actually explore municipal ownership. I'm not going to go over the financial impact yet, or the recommendation or the motion. I'd like to go down and show a map. I'm going to blow it up a little here because it's quite small. So in this top corner, you'll see an L-shaped parcel with the yellow PID right there. That is the PID that we acquired from the province. It had a previous playground on it that had to be removed, but we now own that parcel. If you go further down, bear with me, and I'll blow it up some more. This is the PID we're talking about now, this 45396-785, and you can see the rectangular shape there. That's the PID, the pond itself. Again, this is at the corner of Belknap Avenue and Garden Road. So as I did note, this had been previously owned and maintained as a park/recreation space by the Elmsdale and District Rec Association. Again, it's no longer in existence. The group doesn't, they're not current with Registry of Joint Stocks and haven't been since about January 2007, so it has been a number of years. And in speaking with
colleagues in corporate services, in order for us to actually move forward with looking into this, we'd have to actually make an application to the Department of Justice to acquire the PID if we wanted to, and it is quite a lengthy process. So from that motion in 2020, we did just acquire those other 2 parcels in the last few months. So it is quite a lengthy process, and it would likely require survey and appraisal. So there would be a financial piece to that as well. Getting into the discussion, so staff have looked at previous correspondence. There's also been a number of site visits. We've also looked at information and reached out to Halifax Regional Municipality, because up until January of 2024, the municipality in Halifax did actually have an outdoor ice testing program. We also were given information from Intact Public Entities. They've provided us information on outdoor skating ponds, risk, et cetera. So, you know, we do have to bring forward that there is really some concern about assuming operations and maintenance of this PID, and it's about the liabilities associated with the pond. There's a cost associated with operating a skating pond when you can't control an environment like an indoor rink. You can't control weather conditions, temperatures, et cetera. You really have to consider the liabilities that come with that. We could essentially face liability as operating as a skating pond or not, and there is a historic use to this pond. So even if we opted to explore ownership and not operate it as a skating pond, it's historically been used as such. The community has used it as such, so we would have to consider the liability with that. Sort of this gets into the considerations that you have to look at to ensure safety. It's really about ice thickness, it's about method of testing, and that does require a team of staff. I did work with the Halifax Regional Municipality, in which case we did the ice testing program for the 5 years that I was there, and it did require 2 to 3 staff. They were specially trained. They'd have to go out in teams. They would have flotation suits. They would have to inspect, measure, keep those records on file, and really temperature change was challenging because the ice testing thickness was really only as good as the day that it was tested or the time that it was tested. There's quite a bit of signage associated with having something like this. You'd have to have risk signage. You'd have to look at ice condition signage and post that and keep that up to date. And obviously, information on user requirements. It also lists there what I just said about the staff safety. You know, if the municipality were to assume the operations and maintenance of this, including the skating pod during the winter, there would be significant winter costs. We would have to look at additional staff. At present, our parks operation really is predominantly seasonal. We do have seasonal crews that come on for the spring, summer, and a portion of the fall. But for the winter portion, we really have our manager of parks and buildings, and then one other park staff that stays on that does, you know, park inspections, playground inspections, you know, the maintenance in the fall and the summer and things like that, and working on the buildings that fall under the manager of parks and buildings complement of work. And then again, too, if there was going to be users on that, you'd have to give consideration to waivers and ensuring people have the appropriate helmets and safety equipment to use that appropriately. We did get some information from Intact, our insurer, about skating and outdoor rinks. And they did indicate that as a municipality, we are responsible to meet a standard of care and take steps to minimize the risks associated with that skating. And as I noted earlier, that is a little more challenging when you have an outdoor venue versus an indoor venue. And that outdoor venue, it's challenging to control access and egress to that. The discussion goes into there as well. Like I said, HRM, they did make the decision to no longer operate their outdoor ice testing program in January 2024, and that was a result of the limited number of days that you could actually get the appropriate ice thickness for skating and the challenges associated with staffing and keeping that program up to date. This next section goes into sort of options for liability and risk reduction. We noted these in a previous report. There's waiver requirement, hold harmless and indemnification agreements, and group-based insurance. But in discussion with some Corp Serve colleagues, again, that's challenging, and those don't necessarily apply, or they're more challenging because you don't have controlled access. So really, what we sort of get into is the financial considerations, is that if council wanted to explore this, we would have to approach Department of Justice, there would be the survey costs, et cetera. But then there would also be additional staff requirements for the winter operations and testing, additional staff wages, and then the specialized training and equipment that would be associated with that. From our insurer, they recognize this could be a new service, but there would be likely impact on our insurance premiums because of the risk associated. I have listed here alternatives. I'll list them quickly before I go to the motion because we are suggesting as a recommended motion not to entertain taking on this parcel or taking on winter operations of a skating pond. But certainly the alternatives to that are to start a seasonal ice management program or support a local community that is wishing to start a nonprofit to maintain. I'll skip up to the recommended motion. So move that the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee recommend to Council that Council direct the CAO to not enter into an agreement to take on ownership or operations of PID 45396, 785, and that the operations and maintenance of public skating ponds as a service level is not offered by the municipality at this time.
Thank you. Well, it's with a bit of nostalgia and sadness that I look at the world we live in today. To think that we couldn't simply have a skating pond that people could enjoy in the wintertime when the weather was, but the reality is in front of us. Similar, once upon a time, we had a team of horses and used to offer sleigh rides for the fire department, and we learned very quickly, even though they had insurance, and if we had waivers signed, didn't protect us, so we had to discontinue the practice, and that's very sad that things have gotten. But, and I believe, if I remember right, one of the people who was encouraging this report and to look and see if we couldn't offer this pond. But regretfully, having seen the report and understanding the implication of the report, I'm going to regretfully move that Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee recommend to Council that Council direct the CAO to not enter into any agreement to take on ownership or operations of PID 453-96785, and that the operations and maintenance of public skating ponds as a level of service is not offered by the municipality at this time.
Moved by the warden, seconded by Councillor Merriam. On before the motion was first up, Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you, Alana. You did a really good job of convincing us that we absolutely do not want to take this on. I mean, it's just glaring, and in 2025, we almost couldn't. But if it makes you feel any better, Eleanor, while we may have got use out of that this year, in the past 5 years, it would have been used very little, and maybe the next 5 years. This has been an exceptional winter, and even ponds are, they don't even test them anymore in HRM. And yeah, it just sounds like a liability nightmare, unfortunately. So I'm in total agreement. Thank you.
Councillor? Thank you. Next up, Councillor Hibb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The warden is right. I mean, a lot of people looking at this thing, it's overkill. Well, it might be overkill, but we are a municipality and we have to look after all our assets. We have to abide by all the rules and regulations that's been put forth to us. And if you look at that piece of land, is really, even if you fill the pond in, is really not worth anything to us. And one of the things is not mentioned, I know I checked in this a few years ago, which was all the same things, but you also have to have a communication device there in case you need to call 911, which is probably not a problem this day and age. Everybody carries a cell phone, but that was one of the stipulations that had to go there too. So I fully understand where the municipality is coming from here, and I certainly will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hibb. Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope I heard you wrong, Elena. Did you say if we don't buy it, we're still liable or no? No, okay.
No.
Okay. I heard you wrong then.
That all, Councillor Musa? Well, seeing no one left to speak, we'll go to the vote. Walters said what? He said yes? Okay, so it's all passed, the motion's passed unanimously. That brings us to the end of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, and I do not believe once we adjourn this, there's no extension, an extra meeting of council. Everything else has been, so I guess we get together next Wednesday evening for council. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mover, Councillor Mitchell, second by Councillor Garden Cole. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary of mine, motion's carried.